America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, February 27th, 2025. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Trita Parsi of the Quincy Institute joins us to talk about Trump, foreign policy, and how, I guess, we're just on the side of the bullies now. And later in the program, Hanno Hauenstein will be back with us to talk about the results in Germany's elections. Also on the program, the Supreme Court delays a lower court deadline that would have ordered Trump to pay the $2 billion the administration stole from foreign aid organizations that already did the work. So, SCOTUS gives the green light for now. In those court filings, the administration more than doubles down, claiming they want to cut 90% of USAID. They also say, and Trump did in a cabinet meeting where Elon Musk joined, said they want to cut 65% of EPA spending. How's that for making America healthy again? More poisoned rivers and water, please. Doge keeps publishing receipts that claim to include cost savings, but don't, or a fraction of it. They're also deploying workers from an AI real estate firm and a mobile home company to loot the Department of Housing and Urban Development for its data, amidst a housing cost crisis. The FAA reportedly wants to cancel its contract with Verizon so they can do a deal with, and you're going to be shocked about this coincidence here, Elon Musk's Starlink. I mean, I really don't want the guy with satellites falling out of the sky to be in control of the airplanes. Guys, I mean, it gets scary every day, this footage we're seeing. Anyway, the IRS has been directed to close over 100 offices that provide free taxpayer assistance right ahead of tax season. The number of Americans filing for jobless benefits hit the highest level in 3 months, as traditional economic indicators start panicking about Trump's pending tariffs. Mike Johnson walks back the most extreme Medicaid cut proposals as Senate Republicans cry foul. RFK Jr. cancels yet another vaccine advisory meeting amidst an awful flu season that has hospitalized over 400,000 Americans. An unvaccinated child has died of measles in Texas, the first U.S. death since 2015. And also in related news, an unknown illness killing dozens within days has been cropping up in the Congo. Where have we heard this before? And lastly, after a delay, Israel has finally released the last of the Palestinian hostages agreed upon in the ceasefire deal, but they are escalating military operations in the West Bank. Thousands displaced in Jenin. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Hello, everybody. It's an EmMajority Report Thursday. Hello, Matt. Hello, Bradley.
Hello.
Hello, audience. We recorded this conversation with Trita a little bit earlier this morning. I think it was a great one. He's just such a phenomenal communicator about our foreign policy, and he does so in a way that I think is easily digestible and not dispassionate in like a bad way, but not partisan. Just about being smart,
reasonableness,
and diplomacy, and putting that to the forefront of the way we operate in the world. So I'm looking forward to everybody hearing that discussion. But let's start here. President Donald Trump held his first official cabinet meeting of his second term, and Elon Musk joined in his dark MAGA outfit. I mean, can we just put up this frame here? Standing. Do you think this was like a specific choice that all the other cabinet members, some of them who haven't been confirmed but are just sitting there anyway, by the way, they're not confirmed yet. Elon's, I feel like, standing as a power play. I don't know what's up. Maybe he had a bit of a jittery leg, lots of energy. Anyway, Trump asked his buddy Elon to address the meeting first. He kicked it off. He's wearing a T-shirt, it says tech support there, as they're, making these cuts that just delete parts of the federal government code. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're cutting it, but this is like bringing the move fast, break things tech philosophy to the federal government. So a reporter here asks Elon Musk about at the meeting about if any of the members of the seated cabinet next to him disapprove of Doge, and watch all of these sycophants fall in line, led by Howard Lutnick, who I'll tell you about in just a second.
President Trump put out a Truth Social today saying that everybody in the cabinet was happy with you. I just wondered if you had heard otherwise, and if you had heard anything about members of the cabinet who weren't happy with the way things were going, and if so, what are you doing to address those any dissatisfaction?
Elon, let the cabinet speak just for a second. Anybody unhappy with Elon? If you are, we'll throw him out of here.
All right, pause it. Okay, let's go back 10 seconds. So Trump then prompts the whole cabinet meeting to say, hey, does anybody have a problem with this? Speak now or forever hold your peace. He looks around the room, and you better not. And then he looks at Howard Lutnick, and Lutnick starts the applause, like the little toady that he is.
Clapping like a seal.
Toadie's good. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
I have some more to say on Lutnick, but I want to.
Yeah, but I just want people to pay attention to Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, who's next to next to Hegseth, who's next to Trump.
Anybody unhappy with Elon? If you are, we'll throw him out of here.
Trump looks at him like seals.
They have a lot of respect for Elon and that he's doing this, and some disagree a little bit, but I will tell you, for the most part, I think everyone's not only happy, they're thrilled. So go ahead, Elon.
I'm grateful.
And President Trump has put together, I think, the best cabinet ever. Literally. So, I do not give false praise. This is an incredible group of people.
Thank God.
I don't think that such a talented team has actually ever been assembled. I think it's literally the best cabinet that the country has ever had, and I think the company should be incredibly appreciative of the people in this room.
Great, thank you. So Howard Lutnick, who is now the Secretary of Commerce, the one who kicked off the applause for Elon, is Elon Musk's buddy. Oh my gosh, Comrade Daniel writes in, more like nut lick. Am I right?
Yes, you are right. Very correct, accurate assessment.
Lutnick is heavily involved in crypto. His firm Cantor Fitzgerald holds about $600 million worth of crypto, and they are developing a multi-billion-dollar crypto lending project starting, coincidentally, November 2024. Also in those November 2024 disclosures, it was revealed that Cantor Fitzgerald and Lutnick as the CEO, although has he even stepped down? Has he even stepped down as CEO? Because I went to their website yesterday, and he's still up as CEO. I mean, he's been the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald since the 90s. Not that they've been flouting all of these ethics.
I think Pavlovsky is current CEO.
Sorry?
And Chris Pavlovsky is current CEO. Of
Okay.
Rumble.
All right. Well, either way, he's still obviously invested in this stuff. Cantor Fitzgerald also, in their November disclosures, it was found that they hold around 78 million shares valued at $80 million in a company called Satellogic. Satellogic is in the commercial space industry. And by the way, the Department of Commerce is the agency that's supposed to set space commerce policy as well as cryptocurrency policy, which is the directive that Biden gave to the Department of Commerce in 2022. So Lutnick has massive holdings in satellite and space commercial technology and in cryptocurrency, and kicks off the applause about Elon Musk's role in the federal government. Isn't that poetic?
He's also CEO of Rumble, and Glenn Greenwald, Rumble, who's given his sort of name and commodified it for the investors over at Rumble, is quick to point out Lutnick is himself Jewish whenever people accuse this administration of anti-Semitism. Of course, Elon Musk did a Sig Heil. And there's Howard Lutnick clapping for the guy there. Absolute nut licker.
But Barry Weiss just was touting and publishing an op-ed on, by the way,
crypto-Nazi himself, Richard Hanania.
Right, defending the Nazi salute. We're at this point right now where, we've said this before, the modern Nazi, the modern far-right figure, is also a Zionist. So that includes, it's basically all of the Christian Zionists in this country, but also some Jewish Zionists as well. And that is
or just craven businessmen. I honestly don't know what Lutnick's position on Israel is, but I will say I suspect that Russell Brand is really shy about criticizing Israel. Probably comes from the top of the company, but that's just a suspicion.
That's funny.
And just to clarify, Lutnick's sons took over Cantor Fitzgerald.
Oh, the meritocracy.
Yeah,
right.
Meritocrats are in control.
Right, they're in their 20s, are they not?
Exactly. So Brandon Lutnick will be chairman, and his older brother Kyle is executive vice chairman. But it says Lutnick's sons, both in their 20s, will oversee the
Love
group.
meritocracy. And also, I'm blocked by Glenn Greenwald, so if he said anything about Elon's salute, I would be interested in being informed by that.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably some free speech argument. Here at the same press conference, Trump is asked by a reporter about his view on the role of his cabinet secretaries and if they have any independence. This was his answer to that question.
Part of your mission has been to restore executive control over the executive branch. Is it your view of your authority that you have the power to call up any one of or all of the people seated at this table and issue orders that they're bound to follow?
Oh, yeah, they'll follow the orders, yes. They will.
No exceptions?
No exception. Well, let's see, let me think. Oh, yeah. She'll have an exception. Of course, no exceptions.
Is he pointing to Pam Bondi? He's pointing to Pam Bondi, I think, although it doesn't seem like that's the case. People need to start to think about the gutting of the administrative state in these terms. Trump is trying to make it easier to be authoritarian. And that's what going after the federal workforce is about. The more they get rid of the people who have designated their life to making the American public healthier or safer when they're flying, or not getting scammed by financial companies, the people who have made that their career and have foregone much more lucrative opportunities, frankly, in private industry. People who are public servants are a threat to Donald Trump, who is the anti-public servant elected to the highest office in this country, who is now openly discussing selling citizenship in the supposed land of the free to the highest bidder with gold citizenship cards worth $5 million a clip or something like that to bring over all these capitalists to this country. He is the privatization president. Public servants are of the public. And so their very existence within our agencies is a threat to his agenda of authoritarianism and of mass privatization. And that is why they're gutting the administrative state. That was the stated purpose of Project 2025, or maybe not stated, but that's what it's about. So when you hear all this talk about unelected career bureaucrats, no, it's, the NLRB person who Sam interviewed who got her master's and thought she would work on behalf of labor interests for the federal government for the rest of her life and was, making middle income, maybe upper middle class income, or someone who works at the EPA to test if there's lead in water pipes in Oklahoma or something like
Forest
that.
rangers.
I mean, for people who work for our national parks, who love the outdoors and love the wildlife in this country. These are the people that Trump is saying are a threat to you, as the richest man on earth stands beside him and his commerce secretary gleefully claps about how rich they're all going to get together. I mean, is this as naked as I'm saying, like out loud? Is this coming across to people? Because it's as clear as day.
And, this is sort of a spectacle to sort of reassert Doge authority, because it did face a bit of a hiccup over the weekend when Elon tried to do that email saying, get in touch, and particularly Kash Patel and maybe another cabinet member was like, we actually, the people beneath me are telling me that we actually have our own procedures for this sort of thing, and we'll be following those. So don't expect a response on that email, which is like, that's an important thing. And it's a shame that Kash Patel is leading it.
Don't you mean the wizard in Donald Trump's cabinet? There he is, the wizard.
It sounds like he's plotting against the king a little bit.
Oh, man. Look at this is
also Elon's not in that. I think we need a new update.
It's not. He's not in that, but Kash is. This is his artistic rendering of himself. Just for anybody watching on the internet,
he's nice to himself.
I'm so glad that he's heading our top federal law enforcement agency. Oh my goodness. All right. First, a word from our sponsors, and then we will be having a conversation, or you will hear that conversation with Trita Parsi. This episode is brought to you by Zippix nicotine-infused toothpicks. Zippix brings you totally satisfying, convenient, and a great-tasting way to curb your nicotine cravings. Now you can get your nicotine fix anytime, anywhere, without having to rely on smoking and vaping and putting that into your lungs. Zippix toothpicks gives you an easier, better, and more discreet way to get your fix. They're available in 6 great long-lasting flavors and have options in 2 milligrams or 3 milligrams of nicotine. Zippix toothpicks are perfect for flights, sporting events, restaurants, and literally anywhere that smoking and vaping is banned. They're one of the most cost-effective nicotine products on the market and are proudly made in the USA. And if you're not a nicotine user, but you just like toothpicks, you can get caffeine and B12 infused toothpicks for a quick energy boost. You can also move off the nicotine ones if you're trying to get away from your nicotine habit to the caffeine and B12 infused toothpicks. Zippix have already helped hundreds and thousands of customers get their nicotine fix without needing to inhale smoke or vape oils. So what are you waiting for? Give your lungs a break and try Zippix nicotine-infused toothpicks. Ditch the cigarettes, ditch the vapes, and get some nicotine-infused toothpicks at zippixtoothpicks.com today. Get 10% off your first order by using the code Majority Report at checkout. Your lungs will be glad you did. Must be 21 or older to order. Warning, nicotine is an addictive chemical. Zip more, smoke less with Zippix nicotine toothpicks. And again, you can go to zippixtoothpicks.com, ZIPPIX toothpicks.com today. Get 10% off your first order by using the code Majority Report, one word, at checkout. Again, must be 21 or older to order. Warning, nicotine is an addictive chemical. Zip more, smoke less with Zippix nicotine toothpicks. And lastly, did you know that an estimated 5 billion plastic hand soap and cleaning bottles are thrown away every year? And if that's not bad enough, most cleaning formulas are 90% water, which is heavy to ship, leading to excessive carbon emissions and just like more plastic than you need. Plus, these products are often filled with nasty ingredients like chlorine and ammonia. That's a lose-lose situation for you and the planet. Blueland is on a mission to eliminate single-use plastic by reinventing cleaning essentials to be better for you and the planet with the same powerful clean that you're used to. The idea is simple. They offer refillable cleaning products with a beautiful, cohesive design that looks great on your counter. Fill your reusable bottles with water, drop in the tablets, and wait for them to dissolve. You'll never have to grab bulky cleaning supplies on your grocery run, and refills start at just $2.25. You can even set up a subscription or buy in bulk for additional savings. Blueland products are independently tested to perform alongside major brands and are free of dyes, bleach, and harsh chemicals. From cleaning sprays to hand soap, toilet bowl cleaner, and laundry tablets, all Blue Land products are made with clean ingredients that you can feel good about. Blue Land is trusted in over 1 million homes, including mine, and including in this office where we have the Blue Land soaps, the hand soap. I use the laundry, or not the laundry detergent, the dishwasher detergent, but the laundry detergent is also great as well. When you hear about single-use plastic, that's for me where I'm trying to get off of it. I'm not always doing my best, but because it's convenient, but it's so bad for the planet, and that plastic island keeps growing. And we also know that it's an oil and gas product, so it's not that it's difficult to recycle. It doesn't do have the same yield, I guess. And so this is a really easy way to get off single-use plastic. Blue Land has a special offer for our listeners. Right now, get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/majority. You won't want to miss this. Blueland.com/majority for 15% off. That's blueland.com/majority to get 15% off. All right, folks, now our conversation with Trita Parsi. We are back, and we are joined once again by friend of the show, Trita Parsi, Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Trita, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. It's always good to talk to you, even though it's beginning of the Trump administration. So I guess let's start first with Ukraine. I think this was really notable, and I'm calling this the axis of aggressors because it feels like that's what Trump seems to be orienting our foreign policy towards. The United States and Israel joined Russia in voting against this United Nations resolution that would have condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Trump calls Zelensky a dictator, won't call Putin a dictator. He even what he said the other day about, I don't care if China takes Taiwan. Now, I'm not a China hawk, but it does seem like he is basically saying, hey, the bullies, if you want to bully, go ahead.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. And a lot of very disturbing things certainly have been said. And I think, of course, one of the most problematic ones are what they call depopulation of Gaza, which is nothing more than actual complete ethnic cleansing. But if we start off with Ukraine, I would just take a step back and say, look, I think so much of our discourse has become focused on, are you doing the right name calling against the right person? I would actually prefer that we would just stay away from referring to anyone necessarily as a dictator or not, and try to just figure out how do we resolve some of these problems. Plenty of countries around the world are going to be headed by dictators, and we're going to have to deal with them one way or another. But the discourse in the United States over the last, not just the last few years, but for quite some time, has just become a foreign policy of name calling. And Trump is taking it to a new level because now he's switching and calling Zelensky a dictator and not Putin, etc. But bottom line, if you want to solve some of these issues, I don't think it's necessarily very helpful to call either one of that, but instead focus on actually what needs to be done here. And there was a moment where that was happening. I have to say I'm struck by some of the things happening right now. You had Rick Grinnell, a former aide to John Bolton, sitting on the stage at CPAC and explaining why we need to talk to countries that we disagree with, which is the position that the Democrats tended to have. I mean, this is one of the big things that Obama brought in after 8 years of Bush, in which we were told we can only talk to countries we agree with. If we talk to countries we disagree with, we will legitimize them and their policies and their leaders. And now it's just like a complete switcheroo in which you have not just a Republican, but someone like Grinnell, who as a Bolton protege was actually on the forefront of trying to delegitimize diplomacy as a whole. And now he's sitting at the CPAC stage and making this case. And I think it says something. We've lost grounding. I'm not seeing a foreign policy on the left or the right necessarily that is actually grounded in specific principles, but it's just a reactive name-calling type of foreign policy in which they're yelling and screaming and pointing fingers at each other. And in the midst of that, we're seeing the world going in a very, very negative direction in general.
Certainly, and I'm one who welcomes those kinds of conversations as well. I just do think it's notable when you pair that United Nations vote, which just is lying. I mean, much like Biden did with the UN resolutions with Israel, and then pair it with the fact that he made that dictator comment not in a vacuum, but at a Miami event that was being held by the Sovereign Wealth Fund for Saudi Arabia the day after Russia and the United States representatives met in Saudi Arabia. So what's troubling to me about this is the incorporation of Saudi Arabia in our foreign policy in a way that almost mirrors what we've done with Israel.
No, I think you're absolutely right on that, and I'm very worried about it. And in fact, some of the arguments that I think has come from the Trump administration themselves as to why they didn't vote for the resolution, but instead voted against it, was that, look, we're in sensitive negotiations and this could have jeopardized it. That sounds exactly as our excuses for vetoing resolutions on Israel, in which we're saying, the whole negotiation could fall apart if we dare to say one word of criticism against Israel. And I think that would be a very negative direction for us to go. I think, Trump could easily, if that actually was a legitimate reason for it, he could easily have just abstained on that resolution instead of voting against it together with Russia. And look, and there's things in that resolution, such as the demand for a full return of Crimea, which probably is going to be impossible. Right. And as a result, one can make an argument that, look, this resolution cannot be the basis for a negotiation. But let's be real here. It's not as if the Russians, if they're faced with an opportunity to end the war diplomatically, would reject it just because the United States voted in favor of that resolution. They're rational enough to be able to set aside that issue. So voting with them on this, I think, is sending all the wrong messages, even though I do believe that we need to get back to a place in which we have a much more realistic conversation about what can be achieved on Ukraine, and not put forward impossible goals that deliberately or non-deliberately nevertheless makes diplomacy impossible.
Exactly right. What do you think that this means if the United States' actual actions behind the scenes are matching Trump's public rhetoric? What does it mean for Ukraine and where they may look if they don't feel that the United States is negotiating in good faith? Does this create an opening for Europe to become more involved in this conflict if the U.S. pulls back?
Well, I mean, part of what many folks have wanted is for the Europeans to step up much more than they have. But the manner in which this is being done right now, I think goes beyond the idea of trying to rebalance that relationship, that transatlantic relationship, and it's going into the territory of just, tearing it apart, which I don't think is particularly constructive. Europe can do a lot, and it can do much more. But bottom line here is, it's about finding an end to this conflict. The bottom line, I think, and we've said this for quite some time during the Biden administration, was that there was really no clear analysis that pointed to the idea that time is on Ukraine's side. With Russia's size, manpower, fatigue in the West, not just in the US, but in a lot of European countries as well, which is part of the reason why you see some of these right-wing populist parties marching forward in the elections. It was just impossible to say that if we just keep at this one way or another, we're going to shift and be able to start negotiations from a much better position. In fact, if we go back to the fall of 2022, I'm sure you guys covered it, there was this letter from the Congressional Progressive Caucus that was put out there, was very supportive of Biden, very supportive of Ukraine and the efforts to support Ukraine, but he also asked for a diplomatic track to be added to the policy to make sure that we would be able to assess when it is the time to actually shift to diplomacy, prepare the ground for that, be able to be nimble when it's needed to be nimble. And you all remember what happened. The Biden administration, or actually mostly congressional Democrats, came out swinging against it. And within 24 hours, the head of the CPC withdrew the letter. And we saw that, the space for even just talking about diplomacy was so closed. And a lot of the criticism of the letter was, oh, this is so badly timed. Ukraine is doing well on the battlefield. This is not the time to talk about diplomacy. Well, in retrospect, the timing seems to have been near perfect because it was
it's
precisely
the best negotiating position. Yeah.
Precisely because Ukraine had momentum on its side. And this is important because the plan to get them a better negotiating position, which was that so-called spring offensive, when you scratch the surface of it, it was just a bunch of best case scenarios that had to happen next to each other in sequence in order to get to that magical better negotiating position. And which looked very much like our strategy in Afghanistan. Everything was going to be fine if just these 5 perfect things happen in the perfect order, which of course they wouldn't. So once again, like Afghanistan, we went down the path of a policy based on best case scenarios. And it ended up exactly as many of us pointed out at the time, that this actually would not end up in Ukraine's favor. And here we are. And I think it's very costly because obviously Ukraine is not in a great position right now. And with Trump's lack of affinity, to put it mildly, for Ukraine, the Ukrainians have a tremendous amount of reasons to be worried. But that is precisely why it would have been better to have started those negotiations earlier and having done that under Biden. But that was not where the Biden administration appeared to want to go.
I mean, isn't that the theme? We're about to talk about Israel in a second, but it really does feel like there's a book that's coming out by Jake Tapper and the guy from Axios about Biden's mental decline. I could have been useful during the election or prior to that, when we could have had a primary.
And it could have been useful if folks at CNN, including Jake Tapper, didn't shut down voices who were calling out that there seems to be something wrong with Biden's mental state. But he was on air, pushing very aggressively against any conversation about that.
Absolutely right. But the question is like, it really, I think, will come out, hopefully, when we get more reporting, with this lack of real interest in doing the hard work of diplomacy. That's the theme with both Israel and Ukraine here under the Biden administration. Why they've left us with such a quagmire with a lunatic in office is just basically that there was really no interest in negotiations. It was all about, well, we'll support our ally Israel in their military campaign unequivocally, and we'll say that we're doing these ceasefire negotiations, but it's really about letting the Israelis do what they want. And then with Ukraine, well, this is another opportunity for us here to weaken Russia, so we'll continue to just, like, it feels like it was run by a bunch of think tank neocons, is what I'm really trying to say fully.
Sadly, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it raises some very important questions, which is how come the Democratic Party that under Obama ran on a platform of restoring diplomacy, being adults about the fact that we're going to have to talk to people that we don't have much shared values with, but they're there. There's nothing we can do about it. We're not going to go down the path of regime change. So we have to deal with it. It went from that to a party that rejected diplomacy, slammed down on these members who were completely supportive of the policy. They just say, could we also do a bit of diplomacy on the side? And that got, I'm not going to name them, but some members of Congress calling them yelling and screaming. How did we go from that? And then later on, of course, bringing Liz Cheney to Michigan to campaign with and lionizing her. It really raises the question, how did the Democratic Party become the party that so strongly embraced maximalist positions, rejection of diplomacy, and lionizing of people who are very closely associated with the disasters of the Iraq War? There's some real reckoning that is needed here, and I hope that it will take place very fast, because with the speed in which Trump is doing many of these things, there's a need for a party that actually can stand up for some strong principles, not just be reactive, not just say no to everything that Trump does because it's done by Trump, but actually can push things in the right direction. And I'm not seeing that party right now, and I'm not seeing the reckoning that is needed.
It's so funny you use that word reckoning, because as you talk about the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the leader of the CPC at the time, Pramila Jayapal, we had her on this program about 2 months ago, I think, and I asked, is the party reckoning with the fact that its full-throated support for Israel may have harmed its brand permanently with some young folks. And she said, honestly, I don't think that reckoning is happening. So it echoes exactly what you're saying, Trita. Yeah. But
and some conversations I've had on the Hill, I have to say, the areas in which some reckoning is taking place is frankly more on Ukraine and less so on Gaza and Israel, which is
that's not how I'd order
stunning. Yeah, exactly. It's really a bit stunning, particularly after the poll. I'm sure you guys have talked about it. What was it? 19 million voters who voted for Biden in 2020, but didn't vote for him in 2024, stayed home. And the plurality of them, 29%, larger group than any of the others, said that they stayed home because of Gaza. And we still don't have a reckoning about this. And we're still not recognizing that at the end on Israel-Palestine, this term, as well as in the previous term, Trump was not a break or a shift from the Democratic policy. He was an accelerant of a policy that already was in place. The Biden administration themselves in November 2023 had USAID do feasibility studies to see, can you depopulate Gaza and place everyone in the Sinai Desert? So a lot of these different things are not just coming in now with Trump. They were there before. They were just not moving the
Abraham
same
Accords.
Exactly. The Abraham Accords that just threw the Palestinians completely under the bus. And incidentally, according to Biden himself, although he doesn't put it that explicitly, is the reason why October 7th happened. Because he says that he was on the verge of making peace and Hamas did the attack in order to prevent that. And he embraced not only Trump's Abraham Accord, he wanted to take it further. And I think one thing that is going to be very interesting to see now is Trump is still talking about some sort of a normalization between Israel and Palestine. Is he going to pick up the negotiations where Biden left them off, which would include a defense pact with Saudi Arabia, which means that the United States would actually send troops to defend the kingdom and its authoritarian leaders, as well as giving them very sensitive nuclear technology. This was not part of any of the Abraham Accords that Trump himself did, but this is the direction the Biden administration took the negotiations. And it would completely contradict what Trump is saying that he wants to do, which is reduce troop levels in the Middle East, bring troops home, not be so embroiled in the conflicts in the Middle East. If he signs a normalization agreement between Saudi Arabia and Israel that entails a security pact, a NATO-level defense pact with Saudi Arabia, Trump will actually bring the United States deeper into the Middle East than any other previous president. So it will be interesting. Is he going to use the Biden blueprint, or is he going to go back to the previous blueprints that he had himself, which in my view were still extremely problematic, but didn't go as far as to offer a defense pact?
Well, I mean, the Biden administration, as you've just mentioned, built on the Abraham Accords, including keeping on Brett McGurk, who was a part of the Middle East envoy. I'm not sure if it was the same position, both across the Trump one and Biden. There you go. So same position, he kept him on. And now, what do you know? Photos of Brett McGurk. I guess that was with MBS the other day after he's not in power anymore, I guess. I'm sure doing the dirty work behind the scenes on a privatized level.
Yeah, because he's now with one of the venture capitalists who is making quite a lot of money off of this. So, yeah, I mean, there's just so much problem. And I think, again, if there's one message I would like to get across to your viewership, and I'm sure they already know it, is to recognize that there's not a huge shift in many of these different issues. You have a blueprint, and then the question is, it's the same trajectory, but is it at a different pace than before? And oftentimes what Trump is doing is that it's accelerating the pace, but the trajectory is the same. We would have had the same outcomes if the Democrats were in power, unless they, of course, have that reckoning. It just would happen slower. And it would also be happening while there would be a lot of leaks to the press about how unhappy Biden is about things, but it would be the same.
Right. Certainly. With Biden and that administration, they didn't seem to listen to their base at all at the time, even though, wow, looking at polling now, something like 8 to 9% of Democrats say they sympathize with Israel more. out of, it's either both, but the majority opinion is Palestinians, and independents, that number is crashing as well. So there needs to be a reckoning here domestically. But when you talk about
and that's all ages, and that's
yes,
all ages.
All
I'm
ages.
sure if you were to take a look at it with the younger ages and the future of the party, the future of the country, the numbers are far more devastating, not just on the Democratic side, but actually also on the Republican side.
Certainly. And when you talk about acceleration, Israel is rolling tanks into the West Bank over the past few weeks. The cellular attacks have increased, but I guess this was earlier this week. For the first time since 2002, Israel's formally deploying militarized tanks into the West Bank. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have fled from Jenin. They really started this offensive in the northern West Bank just days after that, temporary ceasefire that Trump, negotiated with Netanyahu clearly before the election, then implemented after. That went into place. If you could just talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the West Bank and how it seems like annexation is the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I mean, look, what we're just seeing again is acceleration of an annexation plan that has been in the works for years. It's just that right now, one of the big shifts that did happen under Biden was that Biden essentially took away almost all of the restraints that the U.S. had on Israel. Not that there were that many, but whatever was left were lifted. And the Israelis have been doing more or less exactly what they want. And I don't foresee that Trump will in any way, shape, or form reconstitute any of those restraints. This is particularly important when it comes to the use of military equipment that the U.S. provided the Israelis. Part of the reason why the Israelis have had military successes is not because there's been some decisive intelligence successes. They clearly have had some intelligence successes, but I don't think that explains the full story. The full story is we took away all the restraints, and the Israelis just bombed whatever they wanted with no limitations and did things that the U.S. military itself is not allowed to do. Let me give you an example. 2006, the Israelis twice tried to assassinate Hezbollah leader Nasrallah in his bunker, but couldn't penetrate the bunkers because the weapons that the U.S. allowed the Israelis to use had some limitations, of course, because of concerns about collateral damage and civilian deaths. This time around, they destroyed it by dropping 82,000-pound bombs, taking out the entire neighborhood, killing about 300 to 500 people to take out the Nasrallah leader, Hezbollah leader. And they got a congratulatory note from the Biden administration publicly. No mention of the civilian deaths. Compare that to when the Israelis assassinated Sheikh Yassin, who was then the head of Hamas in Gaza. They struck his a building in which he was in, killed, if I remember correctly, about 7 or 8 family members of Yassin. So you had a collateral damage of about 7 or 8 people compared to 500 or so with Hezbollah. And the Bush administration condemned it because they believed that the collateral damage was too high. But then the Biden administration congratulated the Israelis when they killed 300 to 500 people. That's what I'm talking about, lifting all kinds of constraints. And that's why you see right now the Israelis taking over the West Bank. That's why you're seeing the Israelis now having taken territory in Syria that is, as I understand it, larger than that of all of Gaza, including the highest point in Syria. And there's not an objection from the US, whether it's Trump or Biden, and there is not an objection from the West writ large. In fact, there's hardly any reporting taking place about it at all. And so it's just complete free hands to do whatever they want. And ultimately, this is going to destabilize the Middle East. This is going to bring more warfare, and it's going to be bad for the U.S. as well.
What do you see as the turning point, or one of the themes of like a time frame of turning point where we got from the Bush administration making that condemnation to essentially no holds barred? And like, I don't know, is it just the increase in prominence of the Zionist lobby, of AIPAC, of the amount of money that they can pour in? Like, what, or even from a foreign policy perspective, if you don't want to speak to it domestically, where's that hinge point? Well,
I think I would actually put it at the feet of Trump, because he comes in and he gives the Israelis everything they wanted that they had not gotten before.
Right.
So recognizing the annexation of the Golan Heights, moving the embassy. Every president had promised that they would move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, but once they're in office, they realized that's a really dumb thing to do, and they didn't. Trump did it, and had this ceremony with Cheryl Adelson sitting in the front row, watching it. And then, of course, the Abraham Accords, which ended the pretense that the United States is seeking a two-state solution, and went to the logical conclusion of what the U.S.'s actual policy is: annexation and throwing the Palestinians under the bus. And what the Biden administration do, they don't come in and say, walk any of that back. Instead, that is now the new starting point. And they're asking themselves, okay, so how can we now be even more pro-Israel? So I would put it, that's the big thing that happened, in my view, is what the Trump administration did in terms of giving the Israelis more or less everything they wanted at the time. And then Biden comes in and tries to essentially outdo them, tries to outdo them on the Abraham Accords, tries to outdo them when it comes to military support. And ultimately, all of this is not only bad for the region, it will ultimately also backlash big time on the United States, whether it is the US's global standing, whether it is down the road terrorist attacks against US targets, etc., as well as, of course, the risk of a larger war in the region that the US would get dragged into.
And I guess that's a good place for us to kind of close here, is just the notion of the United States soft power. I mean, Trump and Biden together, I think, have sped run this process of destroying soft power. I mean, the Iraq War, you could go back all the way to the Vietnam War, but it's been a progression of the United States not using influence and relying even more and more on brute military force. And I think that has accelerated with unmanned drones and other warfare where it's less collateral damage on U.S. service personnel, and you can just kind of bomb technologically. That might be a part of it as well. But with the USAID cuts and the foreign policy that's been pursued over the past 8 years, and now it's going to be 12, where do you see U.S. soft power, and is it at its lowest point, perhaps in the history of this country?
Well, I mean, it really is at the lowest points. We already saw that on the Gaza, in which, cables were coming in from all of the embassies around the world saying, look, this is worse than the Iraq War. Anti-American sentiments are stronger now than they were even back then. And then, of course, you have what Trump has done with Europe, and you're openly Europeans talking about the U.S. being an enemy state. Look, I'm 100% in favor of, giving the Europeans yet another wake-up call to make sure that they recognize that transatlantic relationship is no longer sustainable. They have to step up more. They have to take far greater responsibility for their own security. Many different things that needed to be balanced out. But leaving them with the impression that the United States is now an enemy is not in our interest, and it's certainly not in our interest of our soft power. All of this is taking place in a context that I think is kind of interesting and contradictory, because you had Secretary of State Marco Rubio give that interview in which he said the world is actually multipolar, which, for the last couple of years, that would have been kind of controversial. Some people would say, oh, that's a Putin talking point. Hillary Clinton was talking about it already back in 2010. What was interesting with what Marco Rubio said, however, was to say, actually, unipolarity was a historical exception, an aberration. And going back towards some sort of a multipolar structure of the world is a return to normalcy. That's what I think was very significant of what he said, because essentially saying the laws of gravity of geopolitics is coming into effect and is making the world multipolar. So there is really no option of returning to some sort of a unipolar position, which is frankly what the Biden administration pursued. But if you recognize this, then you should also recognize that the manner in which the United States could bind and limit and constrain the conduct of other states during the unipolar moment based on American power no longer will be at that same level going forward in a multipolar context. We simply will not have the power to be able to do so going forward, at least not in a pervasive global way, which means that we will actually have an interest in alternative instruments to be able to make sure that some rival states don't behave in ways that are highly problematic, and not just rely on American power, because it will be insufficient. Some of those instruments are international law, the UN system, the multilateral system. Another one of those instruments is soft power. And what are we doing right now? At least
we
on the
destroyed
surface,
both.
it seems like we're going
both.
in that direction, not just now, but also prior to that. So if you're actually moving towards a multipolar world, you're recognizing it. The internalization of that also then means that there has to be some severe policy shifts, because we were going in a direction in which we all undermined our own instruments of influence.
Truly, lastly, Trita, before I let you go, with the bombing of Damascus, with Israel trying to annex that large part of South Syria, they've also, broken the ceasefire with Hezbollah, and were bombing in Lebanon recently. They did return many of the Palestinian hostages at the time of recording, but what is the status of this ceasefire, and how long can it hold? And plus, of course, the escalation in the West Bank. Does that have an impact here with Gaza?
No, all of this is, it's all moving towards explosion. I think what's holding it back right now is that people are waiting to see what will the Arab states put forward on March 4th. That's when they're supposed to give a response to Trump's Gaza Riviera plan, and come up with their own reconstruction plan. My hope is that they don't go small, instead actually counter with an even bolder plan, a bold plan that has truly never been tried, which is actually a two-state solution, and call for a real enforcement of decisions that have been made of international law, and actually create a two-state solution and a Palestinian state. And I would couple that, this is what we have been working on and presented in what we call the Better Order Project. I would couple that with efforts to create a security architecture for the region that has to include Israel, but on the condition that there's also a Palestinian state that has been created. That's the incentive for the Israelis. That would address their security concerns in a way that none of the previous offers on the table have. But for them to get that benefit, they also have to then accept that there has to be a Palestinian state based on the 67 terms. My hope is that they will go with something bold, because I think if they want to get Trump's attention, they should go with very, very bold proposals rather than just trying to meet him halfway on his proposals, which are frankly disastrous if they ever were to be implemented.
Yeah, I'm sure you saw that AI video of Trump and Netanyahu shirtless together, which is an image no one wanted, but apparently he put it out there, laying on some Gaza beach with a Trump casino. It's insane. But anyway, Trita Parsi, thanks so much for breaking this down with us. Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. You guys are doing amazing work. Appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Yep. We are back, and we are joined once again by Hanno Hauenstein, independent journalist based in Berlin. Hanno, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for coming on the show again.
Thanks so much, Emma, for having me again.
Of course. We had to have you back after Sunday's elections. Very high turnout elections, highest in decades. Yes. 84%. The Americans could only dream of that kind of turnout. But I guess before we get to that, can you just set the stage going back to 2021, the last elections, and the coalition that was in place prior to these elections?
Right. So the last coalition was basically the first new coalition that ended like the Angela Merkel era that ruled for like 16 years in Germany, which was like really sort of like the era of like sort of post-reunification stability. And after that now came the so-called like traffic light coalition, which is like it was a collection of like the Social Democrats, the Greens, and like the New Liberal Party. And they were sort of priming themselves on progressiveness and progressive ideals, but eventually collapsed because of mainly internal issues over spending, over budget spending. Like there was a lot of like internal disputes, and it escalated up to the point that the coalition collapsed right at the day, ironically so, that Trump was elected back in November. So this election right now is quite symbolic, as it really channels, I think, a lot of the frustrations that people had with this former coalition. Like it's really remarkable how low the turnout has. I mean, the turnout was very large, but like how low the numbers have been for the parties that made up that former coalition. Like the SPD, the Social Democrats, they lost. They have a really historically low number with like 16%. They were seen as this like Volkspartei, like the party of the people. But they didn't have that kind of low number since the 19th century. Like for them, it's really a turning point where they need to ask themselves, I think, like some serious questions. The Greens as well lost like a lot of like votes, and the neoliberal, the FDP party, they didn't even pass the 5% hurdle to get into government in the first place. And yeah, I mean, my reading of this is that, like, you know, I think all these parties' strategy was this idea that by basically co-opting or like accommodating the talking points of the far right that had been predicted to be pretty high and was pretty high. The Alternative for Deutschland party, the AfD, they are far right extremists, and they got over 20% now. And these like liberal establishment parties, they kind of like thought that by basically just co-opting these talking points into like a soft version sort of program, they can like, you know, reduce the threat of the far right. And really the opposite was shown in this election. Like it's this idea that you can basically, by restricting immigration and asylum, you can make sure that this is like make sure that there's a better situation for interior security. That's just like it proved to be not a good strategy for them.
Well, I mean, this is a strategy that neoliberal parties across the West have deployed, and it has not been successful. I mean, I think Labour in the UK is probably going to get hit next elections with some of this. The Democrats in this country lost by doing they just stopped saying anything that was woke and conceded on immigration, and Trump won this election. But at the very least, it looks like the worst case scenario has been avoided, Hanno, with AfD did get the second most amount of votes, as you say. But yeah, this is a very helpful graphic. The SPD, as you mentioned, which, you know, of the former governing coalition and the Greens, they took big hits. We'll show the amount that the SPD lost in just a second, but the center-right party coalition got the most, and then the second most is AfD, the far right. But if we could go to the change here, the second chart was jarring. This is the vote share in gains and losses, and you can see how much the Social Democrats just plummeted in support, and the center-right gained votes, but the traffic light coalition, you can see it portrayed there, the red, the green, and the yellow, all lost support, and then the other parties all gained, including the left party, which I want to talk to you about. But the AfD gained the most, and thankfully it appears like they are still going to be firewalled out, and that the conservatives, as of now, are holding and saying, we're not going to work with the Holocaust denying wing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the AfD, as you said, like it really gained like, it doubled its vote share. Like it used to be at around 10% last time, which was already high and already discussed as a huge crisis within like the German public debate culture. But like it doubled its numbers. It's now at like over 20%. As you said, that concretely that translates to a little over 150 seats in parliament. And given that like this party's major talking points is like kind of an attack on the idea of multiculturalism, also an attack of German memory culture, but also just like open racism and ethno-nationalism and all these types of like very dangerous ideas that are floating around in the epicenter of like Elon Musk and the American right now as well. Alice Weidel, the front runner for the AfD, infamously met with JD Vance just a few weeks ago in the Munich security conference.
Can you talk about her a little bit more, Alice Weidel? She's a figure that I think she's a blonde white woman, very much in the spirit of Giorgia Meloni, but is also in a same-sex relationship, and yet is very, very anti-gay.
Well, I think she is very careful in how she's wording this. Like she would publicly, of course, the AfD is running on whatever fear mongering is out there, and kind of like co-opting this idea of like scapegoating minorities to as much as they can. So they have a very clear anti-trans, anti-queer agenda, and she will publicly emphasize that she isn't queer, but I don't think she's said that she's not gay. She's quite careful how she's wording those things.
Not queer.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where the line is drawn for her. But it is peculiar. I mean, she is in a gay relationship with a woman whose background that person is actually Sri Lankan. Like, so you would kind of like, and Alice Weidel has like a second home in Switzerland. Many people speculate that she's cultivating her own personal tax haven over there. She is a quite peculiar like candidate, like certainly represents this type of like more adaptable mainstream character within the party. Like there are other figures like Björn Höcke or Alexander Gauland. Höcke was like charged by a German court that he can legally be called a fascist, and that like people will not have to sort of pay fines if they do so, which in Germany, where freedom of speech is not such a big sort of deal as in the US, is quite something. And Alexander Gauland, who repeatedly publishes texts that are like filled with anti-Semitic tropes, and like who called the Holocaust like a bird's shit. I'm translating from the top of my head, but like I mean there are very like sort of like dark kind of non-adaptable figures within this party, but like I think Alice Weidel is like somewhat more sort of like is trying to establish herself, as you hinted already, as like this kind of German version of like Giorgia Meloni or maybe the Marine Le Pen kind of type that like hope to be adaptable, and maybe in the future, in Germany so far there is this thing that we call the Brandmauer, the firewall, which is kind of like a common sense understanding among the established parties that there will be no coalition with the AfD, up to the extent that like parties will scandalize if there are common moves with the AfD. We can talk about this later, but like many people speculate that this success in this election might mean that like by 2029, by the next election cycle in Germany, there might actually be something like a coalition with the AfD. This certainly won't happen now. Like Friedrich Merz, the only viable chance for chancellor, the CDU candidate, like very explicitly said he won't do it. But many people are kind of let's say suspicious that this might be kind of the end of this whole firewall era, and that like it won't be possible to uphold anymore.
Well, I mean, that I guess rests on whether or not the center right and the center left can come together and make people's lives better. And I don't know if that's going to happen. And so that's the question here, right? Is like, what does this coalition look like? And will it just be 4 years of gridlock, which leaves more and more time for the far right AfD to gain traction, but also again the left party, which had a bit of a resurgence that I want to get to, because there is some positive news here as well.
100%. I mean, like it's the left really. This was the huge surprise of this elections. It made like huge unexpected gains up until a few weeks or months ago. It wasn't actually 100% clear if the left will pass the 5% hurdle. Again, these 5% is like the minimum in Germany for a party to enter parliament and to actually, gain seats.
And only 5 parties achieve that, right? So
Right.
this time around.
Yeah, there's another party that like is run a new party run by like a former member of the left that splintered away from the left that really just very closely, it's called BSW, Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, that very closely didn't get in. But again, the left got up to almost 9%. This is really huge for them. They ran on these type of like bread and butter issues. They ran on like basically lowering the cost of living, like making public transport more affordable, like making kind of like strengthening pensions and like and lowering like healthcare costs and all these kind of things. And one thing which I think is like really crucial, they were like the only party with like a realistic chance to get into parliament that like didn't throw minorities under the bus. Like they were like the only ones that were like we're not trying to play the blame game of like we have to basically deport all foreigners and immigrants and like basically remake the European constitutional system to oppose for migration. Instead, they were very strong on like these kind of these again bread and butter issues like caps on rents. Like you could see Jan van Aken, the one of the leaders of the left party, running around in every interview with like a T-shirt that like said "tax the rich." I mean, so the messaging was very explicit, very kind of left-wing populist, but also very social media savvy. In a way that really we hadn't seen before. And like I think the left was often seen as this kind of like post-socialist GDR kind of like a little bit old-fashioned socialist party. And this election cycle, especially towards the end, it really managed to kind of reinvent itself as this kind of like a party for younger people. It won the city of Berlin, which is like really a big deal. It's the strongest party in all of Berlin's districts. This never happened before. Like, and I think for many people in my generation or younger people in general, like in 20s to 40s, it's almost like hard to compute that like it's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, and that resurgence, the party. Can you pronounce it for me? Is it Die Linke?
Die Linke, yes, exactly.
Die Linke, which translates to
the left.
The left.
Mm-hmm.
The left, right?
Right.
And so with that exciting resurgence, which is really important, I guess, for the next 4 years, you see the collapse, as we talked about earlier, of the Social Democrats and the Green Party, right? More liberalism as opposed to leftism. We talked a little bit about SDP and it being Germany's oldest party and this being such a historic loss for them to lose this many seats. But what about the Greens? What was their role in the governing coalition previously, and why did they also see collapse? What is their differentiation with, how do they differ from the SDP, and why is their collapse different than the SDP? What's their brand, etc.?
Well, so there are like key figures associated with those parties. Like there was like the SPD was the main figure associated with the SPD was Olaf Scholz, the former chancellor, up to a few days ago. Like formally he is still chancellor, but like that's about to change. Now the Greens sent as their candidate for these elections Robert Habeck, who is considered within the party as the kind of like representative of the more pragmatic sort of wing within the party, leaning towards the right. I mean, I'm simplifying this, but like there is certainly a younger fraction within the Green Party that have been very much disillusioned by the fact that the Greens were not very much like holding the flag of like climate activism, but like they were much more kind of eyeing to enter a coalition with the CDU. That was really what they were kind of hoping for, that this would happen. It is likely not to happen, because even though the CDU needs the conservatives, they need a coalition partner. They can't rule alone. That's like they didn't get enough votes for that. But they can very likely do it with the SPD alone, so they won't need the Greens. So I think the Greens, in that sense, are kind of the biggest losers of this election, because they not only did they sort of disappoint the party base that stands in for climate justice, for broader justice issues. They were very disappointed also by the anti-migrant messaging that Habeck was pushing. And I mean, this is like a broader issue, but like the Greens have been very much front and center in financing both militarily, but also like symbolically and rhetorically the genocidal onslaught in Gaza. Like, this is something that the Greens were really sort of like standing behind. The former foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, is one of the Greens candidates. And so in that sense, I think they will also have to sort of think how they can redefine their own profile. I think that's something that we really many people are looking at, like how this is supposed to happen, but it seems as if this kind of idea to let the pragmatist, maybe revisionist, or like just like more center right kind of like wing of the party take over, clearly didn't work out for them.
And that brings me very nicely to what my next question was going to be, which is, how does the genocide in Gaza play into this, and the suppression of that speech within Germany, which has been very acute? Like, we all know it's similar here in the sense that Germany's been facing a cost of living crisis, as you talk about. Obviously, Germany's physical proximity to Russia and the fact that so many of the energy imports were reliant on Russian energy has exacerbated things in a way that's a little bit distinct from here in the United States. But there is also suppression of speech and protest as it relates to Palestine that I think clearly must have radicalized many people, including just the eschewing of the leadership you say, like the folks that were more pro-Israel. There's the one party of the five that made it over the hump, right. The left, they were the ones opposing arms to Israel.
Well, I mean, even within the left, I think the kind of opposition to the assault on Gaza has been relatively mild, because it's in Germany, this issue of Palestine and Israel is such a divisive one, even more so I think than in the US. Like, it's even within the left in Germany, there's so many fractions on different fractions on this issue, which is too long to explain at length, but like it has to do with German memory, culture, German identity, German history, all these kind of things. Israel is this huge sort of thing for many Germans. It kind of fulfills, I think, in a way, almost like a redemptive kind of function. And like the crackdown on free speech, on freedom of like, even in areas of in science and in the arts, and like there's been so many journalists and filmmakers and artists and people that have been canceled, that had their prizes taken away, that like had job opportunities lost over the past year and a half over this issue. So the crackdown was very much in the air, and I think liberal established parties certainly didn't even try to politicize that issue for mobilizing the masses. Honestly, the only parties that did was Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, this kind of like fringe new party that just very closely didn't make it into parliament. She was one of the few people who very consistently said from the get-go that she opposes weapons, arms sales, arms deliveries to Israel by Germany. But at the same time, like, she didn't land that message with like a younger generation that is progressive in other areas, because she also repeated this type of like anti-trans, anti-immigrant messaging that the right has established for itself as well. She tried to establish herself as this kind of like populist leader that just like sort of like uses whatever works. And within the left, I think increasingly over the past months, the opposition against like sort of Germany's unwavering support for Israel was growing a little bit. And like, I think that really helped them as well. Like, just a few days ago, Jan van Aken, one of the two new party leadership personnel people, he said that of course he would support the ICC's arrest warrants, Karim Khan's ICC arrest warrants for Netanyahu if Netanyahu came to Berlin. And he called, Friedrich Merz only 24 hours after he was elected, and as the new chancellor of Germany, he said that he invites Netanyahu, very, very clearly, directly rejecting the ICC arrest warrants. And Jan van Aken, the left leader, he called this a catastrophic decision. And I think this is also like, for the left party, that again has been a little bit like, there's been some conflict over this issue in the past. I think this is quite a new vocabulary. This is like a new tone we're hearing there. Like they're really setting themselves up to be more sort of outspoken on that.
Or at least oppositional to Netanyahu, which is, I feel like, the easy get out of jail free card for anyone.
Shouldn't be too hard. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like, I mean, man. But it shouldn't be, but it is apparently here in this country and yours as well. Hanno, thanks so much for coming on. I guess I'll ask you one wrap-up final question here.
Sure.
Is the overall theme of this election worst case scenario avoided, but there's still a lot to do and a lot that could go wrong with this level of support for the AfD in the next few years?
Oh yeah, I mean, like it's a very sort of mixed feelings elections. A lot could go wrong. The AfD is like has neo-fascist elements within them. They've worked with right-wing extremists. They are a deeply fascist party. And the fact that 1 in 5 voters in Germany voted for them is pretty unsettling. And the fact that like Friedrich Merz, the one more thing I'll tell you listeners is like that again, only 24 hours after the CDU got this was elected as the strongest party, it issued a so-called kleine Anfrage. It's like a parliamentary inquiry. Which includes like around 500 questions on like the funding and the political neutrality of like NGOs in Germany. And these NGOs, they most of them are like civil society actors, but they included groups such as like Omas gegen Rechts, like grandmas against the right. Like it's almost like it almost reads as like political parody, but it's really kind of unsettling that like the CDU that is supposed to be holding up this firewall against the far right is really intimidating civil societies, intimidating journalists and NGOs on whether they are politically neutral when these NGOs are all of them are like liberal left leaning. So I think we're really seeing a shift, which is in many ways very similar to what is happening in the US. Like it's like maybe not to the extent of like austerity, but like we certainly see like Germany is moving to the right. There's no question about it. And the kind of dismantling of like the rule-based order, like international law, this sort of like idea that you can pick and choose where the ICC has jurisdiction, where it doesn't have jurisdiction, the hard right anti-immigration sort of rhetoric that has become kind of like the new normal in Germany. That's really ringing a sound that's very reminiscent of like this darker chapters in German history. And like I think there's no reason the left did gain like votes, and that's wonderful, but like I think there's no reason to lean back and relax. I think there's a lot of like internally there are going to be a lot of like difficult weeks and months and years ahead, and in many ways this also has like global repercussions. It's a question whether, like how will the European Union realign with Germany being this kind of like more nationalist country and actor right now. Like this is going to be interesting times.
Yep. Well, absolutely. Hanno, really appreciate your time today. Thanks for coming on and informing us about this throughout this last electoral process. Independent journalist based in Berlin, Hanno Hauenstein. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Emma. Have a great evening.
You too. All right. Well, with that, we are going to wrap up the first part of this program free part. Head into the fun half soon. But just a reminder, tomorrow, folks, is a day of basically economic blackout in protest of the right-wing Elon Musk-led takeover of parts of our federal government. It's an economic blackout day. If you're going to pay for things, I encourage folks to pay for it in cash. I know this is not feasible for a lot of people because, you know, we have to exist in a society. But if you have the ability, say you're working from home or you want to just cook instead of ordering in on Friday, this is a way to, at the very least, show some sort of solidarity with federal workers and against what Donald Trump is trying to do. So tomorrow is that day, and people are encouraged to either, you know, not shop at big corporations and use cash when they can. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning, we had a good episode with Van Jackson talking about Ukraine and Trump's foreign policy and supposed cuts to the Pentagon. Also, Elise Joshi, who is the Gen Z for Change leader who stood up to Karine Jean-Pierre saying, hey, are we just going to get nothing for the fact that we helped Biden win an election, except a pat on the head and her decision to protest there, and the negative attention she got not only from MAGA people or Republicans, not only from Jimmy Dore types who said she was a plant, but also liberals who said she was helping Donald Trump win. That was 2 years ago now. So it was really great talking to her and what she plans to doing. Also, if you're in Minneapolis, 2 candidates that I want to recommend. We'll talk a little bit of New York politics in a second here, but Robin Wansley, independent socialist, and Omar Fateh are doing a event together on Saturday in Ward 2 in Minneapolis. So if you're in Minneapolis, go see 2 of these folks. Omar Fateh is running for mayor there. It would be really, really great to replace James Fry or Jacob Fry.
Yeah.
Is James Fry the guy who
He's the Million Little Pieces author.
Guy, yeah, right. I mean, look,
disgraced Oprah.
I'll probably vote for him over Jacob Fry. I got to be honest. But and Robin Wansley serves in Ward 2 as independent socialist. So a lot of people say, you know, I don't like to work with Democrats and it's icky and stuff like that. Well, there's actually people that have won power, actually, not just sat in comment sections. I'm sorry if I sound a little bit salty, but I like people that actually do things. Robin Wansley won a seat as an independent socialist, and she's doing this event with Omar Fateh, who, alongside Zoran Mamdani, are my 2 favorite mayoral candidates going into 2025.
Oh, yeah.
So check that out. I'll just put it up one more time.
We will talk about, I think, Zoran's campaign a little bit more in the fun half, and we will be doing so, I think, a good amount in the lead up to the June primary. If you aren't registered to vote yet in New York City, you can still register as a Democrat. The deadline to change your party registration, if you were already registered as under a different party, has passed, unfortunately. But if you are not registered in New York City, you still can join and register as a Democrat to vote for Zoran Mamdani, or at least rank him first in the upcoming election, primary elections in June. And we have our friends. Whoa, there they are. Hey, Matt, Brandon. Can we hear you?
How are you?
Yes, we can hear you both. How's it going?
It's going good. It's going good. How you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing well. You know, looking forward to the show today. Hopefully it's fun.
We'll see. We'll see.
Hopefully.
I never know what's going to happen.
That's what Brandon's trying to get. He just extracts fun from us.
Yeah, I'm like a energy vampire.
I mean, many people are saying, what's happening over on your show, The Discourse?
Well, yesterday we did a little bit of a catch up on the state of the Luigi Mangione case, or should I say the unfair prosecution of Luigi Mangione by the state of New York, the state of Pennsylvania, and also the DOJ. And also we did a little bit of a medley of like local news channels like castigating Republicans for cutting jobs. So a lot of fun. Tomorrow, I guess, I don't know. I like to live in the moment, so I can't say what we'll do tomorrow, but we will be streaming tomorrow on YouTube and Twitch, 9 a.m. Eastern. Be there or be square.
Hell yeah. Binder, what's happening on your shows?
Sure. On Doomed last night at youtube.com/MattBinder, I had journalist Stephen Monticelli on the show to discuss his recent report outing an ICE prosecutor as the guy behind a white supremacist influencer account on X. And, we talked about outing these far-right neo-Nazis, and he's done this a few times to a few different accounts, and the sort of overlapping attributes that they all share. So check that out, youtube.com/MattBinder, and it'll be up on all your favorite podcast platforms sometime today.
All right, check it out. We're gonna head into the fun half. We are working on incorporating the EmMajority Report theme into our computer service, but this is such a high quality file. It took us a little bit longer than we thought to download to start the show. We have it though.
Yep, we're gonna play it here, and also your guys' mics will be
muted.
We can mute you, yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. All right, see you in the fun half.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the Majority Report.
Wait, whoa. Look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please.
No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. So was offered to tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. So was offered to tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
What?
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Tim's upset.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. So was offered to tour, sushi, and
that's what we call biz.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Look at how sad he's become now. You shouldn't even talk about it. I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Wow. Sushi.
I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind.
So was offered a tour. Sushi and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I had this debate 7,000 times. A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid. Tour. I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, all right.
It's not a fun job. Tour?
That's a real thing. That's a real thing. Real thing.
Willy Wonka tour.
That's a real thing. That's a real thing. Real thing.
That offered a tour.
That's a real thing. That's a real thing. Real thing. That's a real thing. That's a real thing. Real thing.
That offered a tour.
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered a tour.
That's a real thing. That's a
poker with the boys.
I think he might be blowing it out of proportion. Real thing. That's a
poker with the boys. That offered a tour.
That's a real thing. That's a poker. Let's go, Joey.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys.
Take it easy there.
Tour. Sushi and poker.
Things have really gotten out of hand.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Delusional.
Tour.
Deluded.
Sushi.
You don't have a clue as to what's going on. Live YouTube.
Sam has like the weight of the world on his shoulders.
Sam
doesn't want to do this show anymore. It was so much easier when the Majority Report was just you. You were happy.
Let's change the subject.
Rangers and Knicks are doing great.
Now shut up. You don't want people saying reckless things on your program.
That's one of the most difficult parts about this show.
This is a pro-killing podcast.
I'm thinking maybe it's time we bury the hatchet.
Left is best. Trump. Violet.
Tour.
Don't be foolish and don't fucking tweet at me and don't bitch. The way Emma has cucked all of these people. Love it.
That's where my heart is, so I wrote my honors thesis about it.
Oh, she wrote an honest thesis. I guess I should hand the main mic to you now.
You are to the right of me on foreign policy.
We already fund Israel, dude. Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I have an answer to.
Incredible theme song.
Hi, Bumbler.
Emma Vigeland, absolutely one of my favorite people. Actually, not just in the game, like period.
That's sweet.
Now I have that stuck in my head. Sushi with the boys. That's all my head.
It's so good. It's so
It's
good.
so good. It's so good. I get like anxious listening to myself talk, but you know, other than that, it's very good. And the animation is amazing. Us holding up, or Sam and I just basically being like archangels or something like that is pretty good. I don't think we'll take calls today, folks. It's already 1:30 and there's so much we have to get to, so I'm just making a unilateral decision. Oh boy. Let's since we've been talking about the mayoral race, let's just get into this now. So there was an event, I guess it was yesterday at this point, where a bunch of the mayoral candidates went and spoke at a union hall.
It was a candidate forum sponsored by DC 37, which is like one of the largest like public sector unions in the city.
Right. And Eric Adams didn't even bother to show up. He cited the advice of his lawyers. You should step aside, but sure. Although we do know that, you know, if I guess it's a late March date where if he steps aside or is removed after that, then they won't have to hold a special election, giving some sort of advantage to a guy like Andrew Cuomo. And I think we can ride it out for a month, hopefully, because I don't want a special election prior to the primary, because right now, Zoran Mondani has a lot of momentum. I mean, he's in polling second behind Andrew Cuomo. He keeps skyrocketing in the polls. All I'm seeing in terms of attacks against him are, you know, the usual, a socialist. And, wow, he stood up against the Israeli genocide of Palestinians at a protest. Why don't you guys keep repeating that? You know, there were many, many New Yorkers who stayed home in this last election cycle, and they cite the genocide of Palestinians as the reason for that. So I don't think that's the gotcha that they think it is. But here is this clip when asked about if they support a rent freeze, and you can see the reaction from the members of this union when Zoran answers.
Will you support a rent freeze? No. Okay, Brad.
If the data supports it.
Will you support a rent freeze?
If the data supports it.
Can we just stop?
Yeah, that's Brad Lander. So I saw Brad Lander at a Zateo documentary event. One of the, you know, he went to see it. I was like, oh, maybe, you know, he's got good politics. That was a horrible answer.
Brad Lander also there's an old op-ed he wrote in sort of criticizing Zionist support of massacres years ago, not in this current Gaza massacre, and I thought that's a good thing to say. I think it was in like a Missouri paper or something like that. This is exactly what we don't need, is this sort of technocratic BS. I got a plan. Check the data. The data's in, buddy. Nobody can pay rent. Freeze it. Like, I'm sick of this. This is, and I think he might win. Like, I don't know. The way the Democratic primary voters vote, I'm concerned about the type of Rorschach test we're about to be subjected to if Zoran doesn't run away with it. I'd love to be surprised by that. But this is a problem within the Democratic primary electorate, that this speaks to people.
And
I mean, Brad Lander's the guy to have like at the very end of your ranked choicing picks, I guess. Like, he's better than some of the other picks up there, but there are people who are definitely preferable.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that people, the first no was Zellner Myrie.
Oh yeah,
he was emphatic with that. He came out right away. Didn't even wait. Nope.
will not be ranking Zellner Myrie.
Yeah, he's not even on the list for me.
Yeah.
If the data supports it.
Let's get that full one again, Bradley. Sorry, I want to get the full Brad Lander lame answer. Yeah.
Will you support a rent freeze? No. Okay, Brad.
If the data supports it.
Will you support a rent freeze?
If the data supports it.
Yes.
He shrugs.
Wait, respectfully, just to be clear, this is for rent stabilized apartment. That's the question, right? Will you support a rent freeze? Absolutely. Scott?
Oh boy.
Scott?
Can I get a minute?
No.
No.
Okay. Brother Blake? Will you support a rent freeze?
Yes.
Jessica?
Claro que sí.
Will you
So
support?
that's Michael Blake and Jessica Ramos who said yes. And who was that? Scott Stringer who said
Scott
no?
Stringer, yeah, he was the last time around he was trying to be the progressive in the race, and then he got Me Too'd. So
There's a lot of that in this race. There's a lot of that. I mean, Andrew Cuomo apparently
we got
was
a lot of
supposed
Me
to
Too's,
forget
and
about this.
last I checked, Anthony Weiner's thinking about throwing his hat in the ring.
Might as well.
I mean, why don't the ghost of Jeffrey Epstein should run? I mean, why
He
not?
might win based on how New Yorkers vote, honestly.
Spitzer, bring him back. But before I,
literally,
go to
look
this
at the
study,
mayors we've
Brandon,
Look at the mayors we've had. When you look at the mayors for the past couple of decades, it is amazing how Bill de Blasio somehow comes out on top. That's how bad our mayors are, that Bill de Blasio looks good in comparison.
He's definitely the best.
And why? Because he did a major public initiative.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes. Everyone thinks of
Surprise.
universal pre-K, and it's Bill de Blasio's doing.
Yeah.
What,
I mean,
Michael Bloomberg, Eric Adams, Rudolph Giuliani, that's who we voted for.
we can hopefully break from that and show the rest of the country that we're actually sane, because this is the story that I wanted to really pair this clip with. This came out in the New York Times yesterday. Astounding. It's a study that was done by Columbia University and Robinhood together. And I just want to give some of these statistics for people. A quarter of New York City residents don't have enough money for staples like housing and food, and many say they cannot afford to go to the doctor, according to a report that underscores the urgency of an affordability crisis elected officials are struggling to confront. The report by a research group at Columbia University and Robinhood, an anti-poverty group, found that the share of New Yorkers in poverty was nearly double the national average in 2023 and had increased by 7 percentage points in 2 years. The spike is in part due to the expiration of government aid that was expanded during the pandemic. And then just another paragraph down, this is just incredible in a bad way. The report is part of a roughly 13-year study that surveys a representative sample of more than 3,000 households in New York City. Researchers use a different metric than the federal government to measure poverty, taking into account income, non-cash support like tax credits, and the local cost of living. Under that metric, the poverty threshold for a couple with 2 children in a rental household in New York City is now $47,190. The study found that 58% of New Yorkers, or more than 4.8 million people, were in families with incomes below 200% of the poverty line. About $94,000 for a couple with 2 children, or $44,000 for a single adult. Poverty rates among Black, Latino, and Asian residents were about twice as high as the rate for white residents, according to the report. It also says that 26% of children in New York City live in poverty, according to this analysis. This is the hidden crisis in America, and it's hidden because our traditional economic numbers do not reflect what is happening in our country right now, particularly in areas like New York City, where the housing crisis is as acute as anything, and because real estate developers have decided to make New York into a Disney World for tourists and to make real estate associations as much money as possible selling luxury developments as opposed to actually making this livable. Zohran Mamdani is the candidate that can change all of that. And there were others, right? Like Blake Ramos said yes, that they would endorse a rent freeze. But Mamdani is the front runner that supports it, and he's the one that's introduced it into the debate. The concept of a rent freeze. This is the kind of thing that can help our city. We have it at our fingertips right now. And by God, Andrew Cuomo couldn't even be bothered to show up there, by the way, to that event. We better have learned that lesson.
That's very purposeful. He doesn't want any attention until the very last minute, because he knows the more time there is to look into his record, and I mean, it's not that long ago what he has been accused of. And even if you put aside, even if the sexual assault allegations or sexual harassment allegations aren't enough for voters, I mean, there's so much more when it comes to Andrew Cuomo. Off the top of my head, just think about the IDC. To me, people love to think about what Andrew Cuomo did from the bully pulpit during COVID with Trump in charge. But really what he should be known for COVID is the mass death of our seniors, because he forced them all back into their senior homes, and they all passed it to each other, and there were mass deaths in these homes because of it.
Yep.
New York Post has Cuomo at 38%, Zoran at 12%, Eric Adams at 10%, Lander at 7%. I would say, look, Michael Blake, like that answer. Don't like that you're a Obama guy. I would say endorse Zoran if you're so sincere about it. I would say the same to Jessica Ramos, who has had 1%. I'm not here to just hear good ideas. Zoran has both the organization and the polling. None of every other candidate is superfluous as far as I'm continuing. Now, I will probably make a rational ranked choice vote, but as for right now, it is Zoran, 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 and Zoran.
Yep. We need to put all our energy behind making him the front runner for the left, and not do what we did last time, which was split the vote at the last minute, which allowed Eric Adams to win.
We should, at the very least, do what I don't know if you guys remember what what's his face, Andrew Yang and that other person who was running, how they formed like a coalition telling each other's voters to rank each other. Should at least be doing that at the very least. If you're not going to drop out, at least tell your voters to vote, giving them a whole ticket to vote for.
Yep. Yeah.
There's going to be funny business with this race.
Right. Also, I don't know if all the progressives would actually line up behind Zoran. Like I would expect
imagine
that.
At least
I expect that from Ramos, at the very least. But Lander and Stringer and Blake, I don't know if they would even tell their voters that it should be their second, third, or even ranked choice at all. They seem like the types that might be anti-Zoran.
Yep. Jerry at the beach says, I think Eric Adams should set his sights larger. President of the United States of America, all the way with E to the A. Future looks bright. He should. But apparently, what did he say? People coming after him is the modern Mein Kampf.
Yeah, it's the modern Mein Kampf. He had a really big doozy the other day, too.
Oh, right. Yeah. He compared himself to Jesus Christ. Here we go.
So, this is a biblical moment. When Jesus was on the cross, he said, God, forgive them, for they know not what they do. All these Negroes who are asking me to step down, God, forgive them.
He's enjoying it.
Are you stupid?
What? Who's he talking to?
I mean, my guess is Jamadi Williams, chiefly, but
okay,
people who are asking him, saying that he needs to step down.
Did you guys see that
who were telling him he needs to step down?
Did you guys see he was actually pressed on this by, of all places, Good Day New York, like really well? Like I dropped the link in the chat. The anchors are like talking to him and refuse to get off topic on this. It's fantastic. I don't know if you want to play a little bit of it.
Let's play it. Let's play it.
It's really good.
Back to an event you had at the Gracie Mansion last night, where you spoke about Black History Month, and in it you said, quote, all these Negroes who are asking me to step down, God forgive them. Are you implying that if you're black, you have to support you?
No, not at all. I'm asking for all New Yorkers to support me.
So who are you specifically talking to when you say Negroes?
Well, who has stepped down? Who has asked me to step down? If you look at that whole speech,
everyone.
The speech talked about the continuation of lighting your flame and continue to light and shine. And that's what we've done in this administration with our team. So those who have called for me to allow my flame to prematurely be extinguished, that's what I'm talking about.
So you're saying all New Yorkers are Negroes?
I thought I was very clear in my definition of what I said. All New Yorkers, we got 8.3 million New Yorkers, 8.3 million people didn't call for me to step down. I get just the opposite when I'm in the streets.
What?
So anybody who's black who calls for you to step down, They need help from God. I'm focusing on this because your use of the word Negro has come up repeatedly over the last couple of weeks. And I think some people actually have an issue with that term. So explain who you're talking to when you use that term specifically.
I didn't say they need help from God. I said pray for them. Wasn't that what I said?
You said, quote, God forgive them.
Exactly. Let's pray for them. Let's focus on this for a moment. Isn't our democracy is based on who the people of the city elect? Why are we trying to disrupt and take the power away from the people of the city who elected me to be the mayor? And then ask the question, what have I done that we're going to usurp that power from the people? I have not been
Getting
convicted
indicted.
of a crime. I've moved the city forward. I've done the job that New York is
You're being
asking me
extorted publicly.
And so when you have those that are trying to usurp the power of the voting rights of the people, that is not democracy, and God forgive them.
Okay, when you take a look at it.
If you ain't with Eric, you ain't black. And weren't there opinion pieces about how Eric Adams is the new type of Democrat in the vein of Biden, but younger?
Literally the future of the Democratic Party.
Nate Silver. Nate Silver said it.
Thank you, Nate Silver. Now Eric Adams is using the same tired arguments that Biden was in the 2020 primary when it looked like he might lose, basically telling black people that if you're not with me, if you ain't with Biden, or it wasn't in the primary. I guess it was against Trump. It's still inexcusable. But anyway,
all we need is someone to ask Adams if he's thought about dropping out, and for Eric Adams to go, "I'm staying in the race."
I just think it's so funny to compare yourself to Jesus, and then call everyone who is asking you for a step down like a Negro. That's exactly what Jesus would do. Although he did seem to also
forgive them for they know what they do.
Yeah, exactly. Forgive those Negroes for they know not what they do. That's exactly what Jesus said, because he was black, obviously, so he spoke like that.
My personal favorite was Eric Adams insisting that he said, pray for them. And then he's quoted with what he actually said, which was not pray for them. And he goes, exactly.
Exactly.
I mean,
not enough Go ahead.
I mean, you can tell he's secretly conservative by that victim complex he has on full display. He should start carrying a cross around with him. So whenever he's feeling, unappreciated, he can nail himself to it.
That should honestly be the imagery on his campaign.
That would be great.
Eric Adams for New York, and then find some way to make one of the letters into an actual cross. Not enough T's in there, but
the movie 12 Years a Slave is actually based on the mayoral tenure of Eric Adams. People don't know that because it was written and produced before he became mayor.
Don't give him any ideas. He's going to come out and say this. He absolutely is going to come out and say this.
There's no way he's seen 12 Years a Slave.
He's now invoked Hitler and then also the word Negro to describe what he's going through right now.
Wait, what did he say? Hitler thing. What did he say about Hitler?
He said this is the modern Mein Kampf, and what he meant, I guess, was that it's a big lie that he's compromised and shouldn't be mayor anymore.
But Mein Kampf is not the big lie to refer to. That's Hitler's book.
Well, I guess within Mein Kampf, he does talk about the thing where, look, all these other sort of degenerate cosmopolitans are lying all the time with small petty stuff. We can lie about big stuff and get away with it, which I haven't read Mein Kampf, but I guess it's in there, yeah.
Well,
then how do you feel? Then how can you critique our lovely mayor if you haven't taken the time to read his favorite book, Mein Kampf?
Right. I guess we have the clip here. This was his. Okay, so he's referring to Hitler's big lie. Yes, right. But why are we invoking Hitler at all is the question. Here we go.
Well,
Reverend, and I remember listening to some of Dr. King's teaching, and he talked about the book Mein Kampf. And he indicated if you tell a lie long enough, loud enough, people will tend to believe it's true. And that's what you're seeing right there, right now, modern day Mein Kampf. And so we need to break this down in this proper analysis. One of the largest voices out there that is calling for me to step down is the public advocate. I still don't know what he does.
Exactly.
Because it's hard to really serve the city when you wake up at noon.
All right, I think we get the gist. I mean, he's indecipherable, so anyway.
He's not even
Kyle
like
Lex says
maybe-
12 years a mayor. 12 years a mayor.
God forbid. That was. We don't need 12 years of Eric Adams. We had 12 years of Bloomberg.
Well, you know what they say. If you ask for him to step down, you know, they just like put a big N on you.
Yeah. I
Jesus
mean,
Christ.
it's really incredible just like how bad he is. Like he's bad. Like he doesn't even have like any sort of good defining quote unquote moments. Like even Giuliani's got his 9/11 moment for him. Like Eric Adams has nothing. He's been a net negative on the city in totality. I don't even know who is an Adams guy. Like I even understand the people who are Bloomberg people. There was a constituency that Bloomberg served. Eric Adams is literally just serving nobody.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the real estate companies,
Cops
especially
and
if you're
real estate companies.
a Turkish real estate company. But other than that,
Yeah. Recovery Mode says Eric Adams feels like a Nick Mullen bit. Jesus Christ says, I don't condone Mayor Adams. I have no connection to him professionally or personally. Noah from Tampa can't spell American Dream without Eric. Jerry at the beach says, I think, oh wait, I already read that one. Morpheus, hey Emma, speaking of New York politics, did you see that Lieutenant Governor Delgado has announced he won't be running on the ticket with Hochul in 2026? There's a lot of speculation he's going to primary challenge her. He's 100% going to primary challenge her. Richie Torres has also been listed in articles about potentially primarying her, but I actually think Delgado beating him to the punch, like what lane does Richie Torres have? I mean, he'd probably be to the right of both of them, frankly, but I don't know what Delgado's positions are, so it's hard for me to say I support him for a primary challenge without knowing that fully. But it seems like it's likely to be to the left of Hochul, and if that's the case, I'll support him. But I don't know what his platform is going to be. I got to wait and see. He's going to do it, though.
I mean, what we can say is Hochul sucks. Her belated support for the congestion pricing, it would have been nice if it just went through when it was planned, so we'd have even more time and a more severe congestion pricing. So we shouldn't credit her for that, standing up to Trump, and she's also attacking anti-Israel protesters.
Yep.
So screw her.
oh, she's attacking Palestinian history, period.
Right.
She had
Yeah.
CUNY. This wasn't even anything to do with specifically like an anti-Israel or anything like that, or even anti-Zionist per se. It was
settler
literally
colonialism.
a job posting from CUNY, the city of New York, CUNY college, looking for a Palestinian history teacher, and because the topics mentioned in the job post included colonialism and genocide, which are clearly part of Palestinian history, unfortunately, she had them take the posting down, and she called it anti-Semitic.
Yep. Atrocious.
I mean, you don't even need to even talk about recent current events to include the word genocide and colonialism in Palestinian history.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the city, I mean, New York last night just had an orange Empire State Building for those that killing about the Bibas children. And, you know, I see a lot of like a Jewish Voice for Peace person made the point, like, what do Zionists expect from this sort of stuff? That we're all going to forget the thousands and thousands and thousands of bodies that Israel has produced with bombs by killing Palestinians over the last year with some like sort of atrocity propaganda. And the truth is, yes. And it's not because of anything to do with really Israel, except the structure that they're in, which is settler colonial, exactly what that CUNY job placement wanted to study, because settler colonialism will do that. That's why captivity narratives are probably the oldest genre of American literature, because you like to emphasize the person got captured by the indigenous folks, but then they're back to us to tell us how great now they even have a greater understanding of Jesus. This is just what settler colonial societies will do until there's actually an effort to get that impulse under control and treat people like people. And give them one vote. And it's interesting, like Chomsky and Finkelstein, I saw something about them. They were both originally like sort of two-state solution folks, but coming to the realization that there's no way to move forward unless it is one person, one vote within that territory. And that means that Israel can no longer exist as it does, which is, to state plainly, a ethno-state that is designed to maintain one demographic and minimize another.
Yep, 100%. Just to broaden this out a little bit to what's been happening at the federal level. So some blue state Republicans are trying to sound the alarm to Donald Trump about these Medicaid cuts, because he's saying publicly, and I guess there are some people that believe Donald Trump at his word at this point, which is shocking to me, because he's probably the most notorious liar in American history. He's saying that he doesn't want to cut Medicaid, but the Republican House budget slashes Medicaid to the bone. Now, there was a piece in the Washington Post today that Representative Jeff Van Drew, he's a Republican in New Jersey, which is a blue state, is talking to Trump, among other blue state Republicans. Hey, you know, Medicaid provides health coverage for like 1 in 5 Americans, 41% of births nationwide, basically half of coverage and care, or at least it helps around half of kids with special needs. 83 million low-income Americans are a part of Medicaid programs. 5 in 8 nursing home residents. I mean, this would be so devastating for our elderly in nursing homes. And it's more, there are 41 out of the 50 states in this country have Medicaid expansion. There are 9 Republican states that still resisted it. That was a part of the Affordable Care Act, where essentially the federal government pays for all of it, and then they split the administrative costs, the federal government and the state government. So like, it's barely skin off the back of these red states. But this is the policy of conservatism. This is their ideology. They want to immiserate people so that they continue to be in the workforce and can be exploited. And they can transfer more wealth to the top of the income threshold. So Ben Shapiro responded to this and talked about Medicaid. It's been a fun kind of year and a half to watch Ben Shapiro struggle in the Republican rebrand of being economic populist, which is not a thing, but they try to pretend they're for everybody. And you have Ben Shapiro chiding people for celebrating the death of that United Healthcare CEO. And most of his audience is like, wait, I'm on board with this. And then I'd be curious to see how his audience responds to this kind of thing, this kind of coverage of Medicaid, because almost everybody knows somebody who, or has been on Medicaid, because 1 in 5 Americans benefit from it. This is Ben Shapiro's take.
So the House Energy and Commerce Committee is responsible with coming up with $880 billion in the savings. But the reason the Democrats are saying that's all coming from Medicare and Medicaid is because the House Energy and Commerce Committee presides over programs like Medicare and Medicaid. So House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, he, of course, is suggesting that's exactly where all the cuts are going to come from. They're going to come from Medicare. They're going to come from Medicaid. They're not going to come from Medicare. President Trump does not want any cuts to Medicare. Medicaid is a bit of a different story, and we'll get into that in a moment, because the truth is Medicaid is one of the great boondoggles in American public policy. We expend literally hundreds of millions of dollars a year. We expend literally hundreds of billions of dollars a year on Medicaid, and the returns on Medicaid are truly atrocious, just speaking in terms of public policy, speaking in terms of health outcomes. There's some good studies that actually demonstrate that Medicaid coverage is no better than you having no coverage and just going for emergency care to the hospital. Why? Because the reimbursement rates on Medicaid are so low that doctors don't even take Medicaid. Good doctors don't like taking Medicaid because the reimbursement rates are pennies on the dollar of what they could earn from private insurance.
Pause it. Good doctors don't take Medicaid. Why is that the case? Why do we have tiered healthcare in this country? I mean, he's just being factually, he's correct that there are only certain doctors that take Medicaid, and that's a part of our tiered healthcare system where the wealthy get to benefit from private insurance and top doctors, and doctors who take Medicaid yeah, they're maybe more used to taking more low-income patients, and perhaps the care quality isn't as good. That's the problem of an underfunded healthcare system where we have mostly privatized it all. And so Medicaid, a government program, has to compete with the private insurers that are gouging people. I have a proposal for the Department of Government Efficiency and the Republicans who are looking to cut out waste, fraud, and abuse they falsely tell us in our government. How about we make it illegal for there to be a private middleman mafia boss in between us and our healthcare, and make that universal across both income thresholds, if it relates to Medicaid, and disability, and age when we're talking about Medicare.
Because actually, when you talk about bad cost value for money, it is our private health insurance system and our collapsing life expectancy because of that.
And so cutting out waste, fraud, and abuse would mean maybe just make us have one payer, the federal government, for our health insurance. And you know how much costs would go down? Exponentially. So what he's talking about poorer outcomes for Medicaid, which isn't borne out in reality when he says it's better to have no coverage than to have Medicaid coverage, is what he just claimed there. Better to have no coverage than Medicaid coverage. You're serious? If you go into the hospital with a Medicaid card with an emergency, I'm not saying that you're going to be able to have it all covered, but if you go in with an emergency and no health insurance, it could bankrupt you for the rest of your life. What he's saying is completely verifiably false. But then he does that little shift, you can tell, right? When he says the good doctors part. That's when you know he's lying to you.
I mean, he's just trying to gaslight his audience. He's trying to gaslight his audience to get them ready for losing their Medicaid. You're seeing this in, at Republican town halls across America, telling people that, like, oh yeah, you might experience some difficulties, but don't worry, it's actually not so bad. And, because he knows his audience, some people in his audience statistically have to be on Medicaid, and they're going to experience that. And he wants them to, have this in the back of their head when they're forced to try to find some way to pay for their health care.
Right.
And family members are going to have to pay for this stuff for seniors, the 6 and 10 that Medicaid covers for nursing home residents.
That's exactly right. And the nursing homes are increasingly being bought up by private equity that are cutting nursing services and healthcare services to extract as much money as possible. So when we talk about waste, or we talk about how we could improve Medicaid, in part, it's because this money is going towards these private entities that are exploiting government services for profit and not giving our nursing people in nursing homes the right amount of care.
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a conundrum now, isn't it? Right? Because when you talk about the administrative cost of social programs like Medicaid, anything that you're not spending in their minds literally on care must in fact be waste. And we know that's because ideologically they view the whole thing as wasteful. But when a private company has 5 times the administrative cost, that's not waste. That's just profit. That's profit for them. That's revenue. The government doesn't operate that way. So it's easy to frame any spillage as waste. But in the private sector, all of that, all those profits that people tout, that's the waste for you. That's them wasting your money.
Yep. What we really need here is the United Health CEO to come in and tell people what care they can and what care they can't have, because everyone loves that guy, right?
Oh, everyone. Populist right that Ben Shapiro is speaking to. And I have this stat, I didn't want to forget it, that so there are 40 states, and I guess 41 now, but in the 40 states from what I have written down that expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, the states that didn't expand have nearly doubled the uninsured rates of the states that expanded and added Medicaid. 41.1 to 7.5% is the statistic. So if Ben Shapiro is so right about how Medicaid, it's almost the exact same as not having any insurance at all, then why did people voluntarily join the Medicaid rolls and become eligible for it in the states that expanded it and double the rate of the states that didn't? Why did they? So keep going.
Why? Because the reimbursement rates on Medicaid are so low that doctors don't even take Medicaid. Good doctors don't like taking Medicaid because the reimbursement rates are pennies on the dollar of what they could earn.
So make them more. Again, that's the problem. Then that's the problem. That's the problem. Because
people like you are pinching pennies. Billionaires aren't letting it be as generous or even competently to pay the cost as it should be.
I'm sure. I know his wife's a doctor. I'm sure she's a millionaire along with him. But like, I don't know if we should be reorienting our healthcare policy or continuing to orient it around the profit maximalization of doctors.
Well, yeah, because I mean that's what's driving the cost up. It's not necessarily a bad thing that the reimbursement rate is low for Medicaid in a vacuum, because it means that the government, by nature of being the government, has like a large amount of like negotiating power. Like we know that what drives up healthcare costs in America is like that, that magic triumvirate of health insurers, large health systems, and pharmaceutical companies that like are creating like a price rising spiral of like, well, you can charge more and you can pay out more and we can charge more, and then it makes everyone rich except for the person looking to get healthcare. That's just there's a slightly different motive when it comes to Medicaid and the administration of Medicaid, which is to maximize like health outcomes for the patient, not to like maximize profits for like the insurance company or the health system. So it's just like it's competing motives. Like that's why it's like it worries more about keeping costs low.
And doctors that are in it for profit are in part the reason we don't have a healthcare system. They are the ones who hired Ronald Reagan back in the 50s to speak against Medicare for all. And the truth is we should be making it much easier to train more doctors by making higher education more available. And any doctor, like Ben Shapiro's wife, presumably, that thinks it would be slavery to work under a public health insurance regime or something like that, should be encouraged to find a new line of work, because that's fucking evil. And those people are disgusting.
It's actually a complete violation of the Hippocratic Oath,
No,
but
exactly.
not to be corny about it.
Those are the people that, like, if there's one group that should be wiped out by AI, it is doctors that think that they should be able to extract maximum profits and drive Benzes around everywhere, as this country is massively undercared for.
Or people who come into that way of thinking because they're $200,000 in debt coming out of medical school, to Matt's point, which is what is a big problem in our healthcare system in particular, is that it's so expensive to become a doctor that it, like student debt more broadly, but specifically with graduate school, and you can apply it to law school, it funnels people into the jobs that will let them pay off their debt as quickly as possible. And that it makes it so that it exacerbates the income and wealth inequality. Billy in Portland says, I was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer in September 2023, September 2023. Medicaid paid for 7 cycles of chemo, major surgery with 5-day hospital stay, radiation, regular screening CAT scans and MRIs, countless medications, including one that is $37K out of pocket per month, even services to help with chemo side effects like acupuncture. Ben Shapiro can suck on my chemotherapy port that Medicaid paid for. Thank you, Billy, in Portland, for telling us your story. Now, here's Ben Shapiro telling you that having Medicaid is the same as having no health insurance at all.
Medicaid is, in fact, a giant government make-work program that does not have particularly good outcomes. But just as with every giant government make-work program, it has now become a third rail of American politics. Hakeem Jeffries and Democrats are, of course, going to suggest that it's tax cuts for the 1%, and on the basis of that, it's going to be cuts for the poor.
Yep.
Let's be realistic about this. The only people paying taxes in the United States of America on an income level are the people in the top quintile. In terms of net taxes paid, net of benefits received from the government, the only people paying any level of net income taxes in the United States are people in the top income quintile.
This is just verifiably
Everybody else
false.
is receiving on net money from the federal government. So if you're going to cut taxes, who else presumably is going to have their taxes cut? How would that work?
No,
By the way,
pay you,
it also
man.
happens to be the case that the Trump tax cuts disproportionately affected people in actually the middle income quintiles.
I just can't tell, like, I guess Ben Shapiro's audience is probably pretty old and like, probably older, upper middle class. Like, but I can't imagine not having hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank and listening to Ben Shapiro just like talk down to you about how you don't need healthcare and like feeling good about that. Like, it's so like demoralizing. It's like so demeaning, like a very, I can only imagine like the audience must not be comprised of that many people who fall into that category, or if they do, like, I don't know what they're attracted to in the show. Like, it seems like, half of the show is just like telling you that you don't deserve to live. You don't deserve to be able to live.
Conservatism is by and large like a bunch of very stupid, like 40 to 50-year-old men that will just eat shit entirely. And then you got the rich guys there. Like, the idea that Elon Musk doesn't get like we've fully accounted for what he gets from the government by being able to, frankly, privatize NASA for the guy, when Barack Obama in 2009 was saying, look, we need to do something else. We need to bring in private industry to do space stuff. SpaceX was the main company mentioned. And it would not exist if Obama hadn't decided to do that. Same with all this Starlink crap, that he's a government contractor. The self-driving stuff he's only allowed to experiment with cameras which don't work as well as LiDAR, which frankly shouldn't be allowed on the road. He's allowed to do that because the government is actually, every self-driving car, not only Teslas, but also the Google ones and all the other ones all over Austin and San Francisco, they are providing American streets as a test environment for corporate benefit. We are all getting screwed. None of us can pay for a fucking house because these guys run the government and they think that they're the ones getting the raw deal. Ben Shapiro is paid to lie to you on behalf of those folks.
He absolutely is. And it's borne out in the data. How long can this little man gaslight his audience for? We see that we are at levels of income and wealth inequality that are analogous to the Gilded Age and even pre-revolutionary France. So the idea that this is in any way sustainable and that he can keep saying that rich people are paying more into taxes and his audience is like, okay, I mean, really? How dumb are you? How much of a mark are you? I guess enough to vote for Donald Trump.
He's are you talking about the
his audience?
Yeah, they're stupid. I mean, he's a mercenary.
I mean, honestly, we have seen through the Joe Rogan experience and these online influencers, if you talk with authority, there's about 35% of the country that's just going to automatically think that you have something to say, and that I don't know what to do with. So
I have to.
You don't need to talk with authority. I'm seeing people just share whatever bullshit they see that basically, holds up their already preconceived notion of what's going on or their worldview. I see people sharing right now an old, I don't even know where it came from, but there's this old Snopes debunked thing from the first Trump administration, where Obama received royalty checks every year from the government for the use of the term Obamacare. And I'm
the
seeing
Republicans came up with that.
He should.
But I'm seeing, but I mean specifically where it came from. But now I'm seeing it all of a sudden after not seeing it for 6 years. It's all over the place again, as Doge uncovered that Obama receives $2.5 million of the year for the government to use the word Obamacare. And people online, I've seen it on TikTok, videos of people going crazy over this, screaming at their camera about how their hard-earned tax money is going to Obama. It's not true. It's a lie. There's no Obamacare royalty.
They should have said 2.4 billion. They should have put a B on that. That would have made people really upset. That's million is barely any money. Come on.
B for Barack.
B for Barack.
You were talking about how the term Obamacare came from Republicans. Right. It's not even a government used term. I was saying I'm not sure where this specific lie came from. Obviously from a right winger, but where it originated, who knows? But people are sharing this shit today.
That was the rare branding. Most of the time, the Republicans are able to force something, enforce, whatever they're doing with DEI now or cancel culture and make it into some politicized phrase that benefits them. The Obamacare thing did not benefit them. He ended up owning it because turns out
it forced him to own something they actually did, which Democrats never want to do.
Exactly. And I was thinking about that in the context of the checks, where Obama was going out there and saying how Trump signed the stimulus checks as if that's a bad thing. Oh, wow. He tried to own a policy that he passed. Maybe you guys should try it sometime. And the one time that happened, as Matt says, it kind of worked. Wanted to get to this. Broke earlier this morning that Andrew Tate and his brother, who have been charged with human trafficking in Romania, are back in the United States. The United States lifted travel restrictions that had previously been imposed because of the well-documented human trafficking efforts. We had what's it called? What's the name of that book that we had those guests on with Matt Shea and Jamie Tassin?
Clown World.
Clown World, where they dove deep into the Andrew Tate world and even went to one of his kind of multi-level marketing scheme pimp.
They're pimps for cam girls. They
Right.
entrapped young women that were basically looking for any sort of guidance, which is what sort of often happens with sex traffickers. And they were entrapped into making content for them online.
And people should check out that interview if they haven't yet, because it just shows how exploitative and really disgusting this is, where this new kind of online brand of misogyny culture, it's about using women essentially as gig sex workers and then disposing of them after you've exploited them. And it's not necessarily about controlling your wife in the marital sense. It's about humiliating women and tallying a body count, right? It's a very violent form of misogyny. And I think about this a lot, right? And the environment that we're in right now. That the Trump re-election this second time around was a lot of things. I think, it's about mass disaffection with the Democratic Party because of cost of living and housing being out of control. It's about Biden not being unable to use the bully pulpit and communicate with the public, so people didn't know anything about what the Democrats were doing, even the good things. And what they did know was, hey, there's a genocide that's happening on my phone. And then you have, though, broadly, a misogynistic backlash to the Me Too movement. And Trump coming into office kind of generating that energy, or, it was the grab him by the P word tapes, more Me Too, Biden gets elected. And then we have really in this time period, the rise of these misogynistic manosphere influencers, and Trump gets reelected, put up against a black female candidate who we talked about doing violence against openly at his rallies. And you kind of have this toxic misogynistic stew that I think we're living in right now. And frankly, when you look at fascist movements in the past, pairing misogyny with a cost of living crisis, it's had success for fascists historically. So it's scary. And it seems like Trump was integral in freeing Andrew Tate. And oddly, Ron DeSantis is pissed about it. We'll see more about this story, but Tate touched down in Miami, I guess earlier this morning, and Ron DeSanctimonious asked about it at the press conference.
Welcome here, what the state do, send back to Romania or whatever.
We have no involvement in that. I read about it through the media. Clearly, the federal government has jurisdiction, whether they want to rebuff his entry into the United States, and I have confidence that whether it's Pam Bondi or Kristi Noem, that they will be looking at that. I do know our Attorney General, James Uthmeyer, is looking at what state hooks and jurisdiction we may have to be able to deal with this. But the reality is no, Florida is not a place where you're welcome with that type of conduct in the air. And I don't know how it came to this. We were not involved. We were not notified. I found out through the media that this was something that was happening. Okay, guys.
You know why it happened?
Because the Republicans supported a rapist with a fake university for president?
Kind of. And also, Barron Trump's a fan. Barron Trump's a fan of Andrew Tate and Aiden Ross and those guys. Yeah.
Is Matt Gaetz' seat still open? Because I think, Florida District 1 has to be represented by a sex criminal. So they got to, I think
that's their DEI. Diversity includes some sort of quota for rapists.
Yeah, I know. And I think the real problem is that they're not getting a homegrown Floridian sex criminal. They're importing one. It's like an H-1B visa situation all over again.
They're taking our sex pest jobs. It's fascinating to see this, especially as the Trump administration is loudly advertising that they're going to release the Epstein flight logs. Why don't you release the files that are a little bit more pertinent in this case? I know that some of the stuff is redacted, but they are not going to release, in the same way that Trump is doing this head fake about the JFK files too. they can't release more information than like a limited hangout on Epstein because of, Donald Trump's deep and close friendship with Jeffrey Epstein.
Pam Bondi was the Florida Attorney General when Epstein was getting let off. What this stuff is, when Trump talks about it, whether it's the UFO stuff or, which I think is probably the most meaningless of all this, but the UFO stuff or the JFK stuff, is he is announcing that he is taking note of bargaining chips. And if the CIA wants him to, say, not release the redacted Schlesinger memo where JFK talked about what he wanted to do to the CIA, which is one of the ones that is still being withheld, if the CIA doesn't want that released, then they should give him something in return for it, like they did last time, and when he kept it clear. And I mean, also the Epstein stuff, he is, I don't know if Trump was in Dallas in 1963. He is a associate of Jeffrey Epstein, who is also a guy who Jeffrey Epstein fixed up Elon Musk's brother with a girlfriend. So like, all these guys are insanely implicated with what looks to be, if I had to guess, a massive mutual blackmail operation where they do communal sex crimes. This is just me spitballing. Communal sex crimes and have dirt on everybody else so they know nobody will talk. Because I do know another similarity between Epstein and Elon Musk is they're obsessed with spreading their seed as widely as possible in a really fucking weird way. And I would be shocked if they never discussed that.
Oh, of course. Of course. Just to plug Julie K. Brown here, making this exact point. Brown is the really kind of foremost authority journalist on Jeffrey Epstein. She broke the initial story about the cozy deal that he got from Acosta. Mm-hmm. So she's a Miami-based reporter and has written a book called Perversion of Justice, the Jeffrey Epstein story. She says, it's interesting to note that Pam Bondi was Florida's Attorney General 2011 to 2019, a period of time when Jeffrey Epstein's plane records became public, victims' lawsuits were filed, and a lot of new evidence against Epstein surfaced. So questions should be asked why she did not take up the case or launch a probe when she was Attorney General in Florida. And we know the answer. We know the answer that there was frankly, an elite conspiracy to prevent Jeffrey Epstein from facing accountability. It seems abundantly clear.
Acosta himself said there was intelligence connections that meant we have to go easy on him.
He was a very important asset to a lot of folks, I think, is what hopefully people are taking away from this, including Israeli intelligence.
Ghislaine Maxwell's father was sort
Mossad.
Of Mossad, like not just any Mossad, like high-level Mossad.
So, and then you have former Israeli prime minister riding on Jeffrey Epstein's plane, and Israeli intelligence and U.S. intelligence work very closely together.
And I was saying this because just in the we've talked about this a lot in the context of like why a lot of these cabinet secretaries are like useful for Trump, like Hegseth's like proclivities as a drinker, as a allegedly a drinker, and have in his alleged sex crimes as well. They're like an asset to Trump to like use against him. But the same thing with Bondi. Like Bondi's useful in the way that like she's shown that she would do anything for him when also she dropped the Trump University lawsuit in Florida as well after he donated to her campaign. So she's very much like all of like the good tentacles of like what Trump looks for in a confidant, his own, wanting to his own Roy Cohn, as it were, for Attorney General. She embodies. Yep. And we've also seen that in like how reticent they are about the Epstein stuff, as we saw from that interview that Trump had last year, where he was like, "That's a little bit more marginal, the Epstein stuff. We don't have to go there."
Yeah, that's not good.
Did you see the who just left the White House earlier today? Like the photos.
I did not.
Okay, so there's a group of people who left the White House today, posing for the camera with binders they received from Bondi, labeled the Epstein Files Phase 1. And ready for the list of people who they gave them to?
Who?
The MAGA meme guy on Twitter, DC Drano, former news person turned conspiracy theorist Liz Wheeler, our good friend Mike Cernovich, Jack Posobiec, and Libs of TikTok. So this is going to be
rotation.
This is going to be like Twitter Files, 2.0. where they carefully crafted exactly what to give and who to give it to and to get out exactly what they want.
Because this is all information. Julie K. Brown again points this out. The second tweet I sent you, Bradley. Just go to the first one she says, and then her reply. There is no Jeffrey Epstein client list, period. It's a figment of the internet's imagination and a means just to slander people. I mean, this isn't to say that there aren't associations that we need to explore.
Like between the Clintons and Jeffrey Epstein.
Which we're not partisan about it. The Clintons and the Trumps, we should be looking into their connections with Jeffrey Epstein.
Should be locking them up.
Yeah, but her response to this person, obviously there's no list, but just as obvious, the federal government has a file related to Epstein, right? Says, well, if you actually read my book or anyone's, you would know that the FBI file on Epstein is public. Google it in the FBI's vault. It's, however, heavily redacted. So yes, there's a file. Now, there are redactions that are going to be for victims' names, but there will also be redactions for folks that may be sensitive and a part of it. But the list that they're circulating has already been the subject of conspiracy theories for quite a while. And the fact that they're handing it to Chaya Raichik.
It's what's known as a shit coat, which is basically a type of a limited hangout to reveal sort of secrets done in a way that's so stupid and disgusting that most people won't even touch it, which is how most people will view this.
But the thing is that the folks who care most about who claim to care most about the Epstein list on the right, they're the ones who demean and belittle the actual people who should be revealed, because they're the ones who constantly share the fake Epstein lists that are out there. Like Tom Hanks's name on the internet is, for whatever you think of Tom Hanks, the actor, his name is forever in the mud because you can't write his name on the internet without people calling him a pedophile. Why do they call him a pedophile? He's done nothing to prove anything like that. It's all because his name appeared on a fake, completely debunked, non-realistic Epstein client list, and they wanted to use that when he came out and said something pro-COVID vaccines or something to try to hurt his credibility. Now, anytime Tom Hanks, the actor's name, is said online, you have hundreds of people calling him a pedophile.
Yeah. No, it's exactly. I just to connect it to the Andrew Tate stuff. This is just what makes it so ridiculous, and has it ring so hollow. Really? Do you care about do you care about groomers? Do you care about groomers, or do you just essentially want to go after LGBTQ people? Really? Do you care about sex trafficking, or is this just a way to crack down on immigrants and make a case that another marginalized group that you're targeting is a bunch of people that are targeting folks and kids for sex crimes? I mean, it's just so obvious what they're doing, but
the most vocal
people
ones
fall for it.
The most vocal ones have been proved to be rapists and pedophiles themselves. There's numerous incidents of Jan 6 folks or people that were really promoting that movie from
Sound of
a year
Freedom.
ago, that they are actual abusers and themselves. But the other thing is so many Trump supporters. I mean, Kevin Sorbo, Minnesota native, alumni of Minnesota State University, like myself. Unlike myself, he is in Jeffrey Epstein's little black book with his full contact details. Also, Jason Calacanis, a venture capitalist, Trump supporter, big crypto guy, who's one of these guys out here saying, release the client list. You're in the black book, buddy.
Wait, Kevin Sorbo is in the black book? I didn't see that.
He is, yeah.
See, that's an example of a guy that should 100% be investigated, because it's not even like he's one of those money guys who ostensibly would have crossed Epstein in the actual business that Epstein claimed to do, the financiering stuff. What the hell is some low-level actor doing in Epstein's book if he's not partaking in as a customer in the services that are within his financial range? That's unbelievable that he is in that book.
Yeah.
That's not a guy making some big business loans and dealings. That's a guy who's looking for services.
Maybe
Allegedly.
Jeffrey's just a big fan of Sorbo and his work.
Hercules. Yeah, I mean, go. Who didn't watch the
Name
Hercules?
another thing he's done.
Yeah, I
quick.
can't.
God's Not Dead 1.
God's Not Dead, right?
How could I forget?
Picked the wrong person for that question.
I think God's Not Dead 2 is the one that sticks out in my mind. Is that
That's
the
a good one.
courtroom drama with Melissa
Yeah, that's
Joan
the good
Hart?
one. And Ray Wise, yes, that's a really good one.
I mean, much like I would say the Lord of the Rings series, the middle one is the best, or the second one. Maybe there's God's Not Dead 6, and I'm
I would say
messing it
with the
up.
God's Not Dead's movie, the even numbered ones are the best. Like 2 and 4 are pretty good, and then 1 and 3 are kind of boring.
Well, the
Although when
odd
Kevin
numbers
Sorbo
would
gets
be
hit by that car,
satanic. So
well, when Kevin Sorbo gets hit by a car in the first one, spoiler, that part's pretty good. But like other than that,
Well, the first one's got the whole like surprise element of like, what am I getting myself into? What the hell is this movie? After that, all the sequels, you know what to expect, so it's not as like, fun, I guess.
not as novel.
Yeah.
I might have to retract the Sorbo in the Black Book thing. That
Did you fall for the fake?
I fall for the fake image. Yeah.
But this is what Brown is saying. Like, this is a show trial. This is theater. They're pretending they're being transparent, and they're trying to mislead people, which is the UFO thing too.
Right, and this just goes like what just happened shows you that like just how these guys have demeaned this to the point where it even left the right wing circles, and now you have people pointing fingers and accusations at all sorts of people who are in Epstein's a book or not. That at this point, who's going to even believe the official thing? People are going to obviously like just say whatever they want to say. I mean, certainly you can't believe who they gave it to, these actors of these right-wing bad actors. But I mean, it's just the whole thing is a shit show.
Yeah.
And being weaponized by the right, which is like how the Democrats let the right sort of make use out of the JFK assassination is sort of why they've also, to the Trita Parsi interview earlier, been unable to be the anti-war party. It's corrupt by this military establishment people.
Yeah. All right, guys. With that, I'm gonna read some IMs and then we'll get out of here. Detective Du Bois says, "Big Joel on YouTube goes through the movies and his analysis is so funny. Love Big Joel. His rant on Amy Schumer's Zionism in the few months after October 7th was extremely cathartic. If people want to check out Joel." Mike from Texas. "Also, don't forget Robert Costa was given a cabinet position despite having zero relevant experience for the Department of Labor." Was he on the list?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I think it's confusing.
You're confusing Alex Acosta with Robert Costa, I think. I was referring to Alexander Acosta from the first Trump term. Yeah. Gold Rush John. When Ben Shapiro says quintile...
Oh, no, he was made Secretary of Labor. Alex Acosta? Yeah.
Right, but he said Robert Costa.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
I thought he shouldn't have been Secretary of Labor anyway.
Right. David from the Bay, Matt is 100% correct. Places like San Francisco are a beta testing ground for things like self-driving vehicles, and it's dangerous. Years ago, Uber was told to pause their self-driving service by the California Department of Motor Vehicles. Uber got mad and relocated the program to Arizona. Not a couple months later, an Uber's self-driving car killed a pedestrian. Yep. Bobby Nafo. Obama and Biden were completely duped by Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos too.
I mean, a lot of idiocy, honestly, to go along with just the corruption.
Seth the Lit PhD. Simply put, increase reimbursements. My wife is a pediatric psychologist, and the issues around Medicare and Medicaid are real, but the issues that the program is underfunded. Classic right-wing policy. Starve and cut. Exactly. If they wanted to make it work, they would make it more so that those doctors are reimbursed more to level the playing field, but that's not what Ben Shapiro wants.
But that's the thing is he gives it away when he says, what do you want rich people to pay more? Obviously, that's not a solution. Like, no, it is. It is very much a solution. We should be absolutely rinsing rich people, and society is not going to get better. None of the issues that we're concerned about will get better. It will get better from Ben Shapiro's standpoint, but nothing's going to get better if billionaires are allowed to continue what they're doing.
Biden My Time says, wow, Adams is in a full breakdown. Didn't realize it was that bad. He is not okay.
Oh,
yeah. Your Joy, My Socialism. Really disappointed by Brad Lander. I've appreciated he's been pretty good on Palestine, but come on, man. Yeah, that was not a good answer.
This is why I don't call myself a progressive and call myself a socialist. It's exactly what Lander's doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is the technocratic stuff that, specifically when you put it up against Zoran, it's so needless. It's just so useless.
It's that middle manager position that the Democratic Party politicians like to like strike, like the middle manager between you and like, you know, the capital owners. They're going to tell like, yeah, maybe we can do that if after I talk to the boss, the numbers look right, or after I, you know, like after we crunch those numbers and everyone takes their share like that, like we can afford it. And I think people are hip to it now. They can see that like that kind of middle manager speak that the Democratic Party like weaponizes to, you know, keep things from happening is like uniquely unappealing to Americans in trouble.
Yeah, and it's not just Americans. Like we just had that conversation with Hanno about Germans and how like basically these liberal managers lost so much ground in this election.
You know what Claudia Sheinbaum's approval rating is?
80%.
80%.
My queen.
If she was a neoliberal, or even if she was like a sort of squishy progressive that supported Israel's right to defend itself or whatever, every American would know. Like CNN would have a documentary out on her right now that they would have like played commercial free. But because she's about supporting the poor and putting money in their pockets and massive sort of state initiatives that we're afraid of, and also going after a corrupt judiciary, she's going to be portrayed as like an authoritarian or weak enough for us to like bomb her country.
Schwing State, I feel that Trump Gaza video was made satirically, but Trump is too vapid and stupid to get it. I mean, I was shocked he posted even an AI rendering of him shirtless. He notoriously does not take his shirt off.
I think it's a dream of those guys. That's what they think about. Jared Kushner's been talking about this for a long time. I think Trump was genuinely tickled by it. I think Netanyahu's generally tickled by it. They love that shit.
Burger dude, everyone living paycheck to paycheck is effectively paying a 100% wealth tax, so the majority of Americans are never able to get ahead. So even though it's called an income tax, it's effectively a massive wealth tax. It's only the absurdly wealthy that can afford, that can effectively do not pay taxes. Yeah, I mean, the wealth tax, that's like a Warren kind of brand. But even if you want to go to the estate tax, like, it's portrayed, what the Republicans changed it back in the Obama years to a death tax, right? That was the rebrand suggested by Frank Luntz and the pollsters. Because you know why? 99.9% of people don't have estates to even get taxed at 50-ish% before they leave it to their kids. Give me a break.
Yeah, we won't have time to play it, but there's this guy, Dave Rubin. We'll do it in the next couple of days. Dave Rubin debated. And they're like, well, what would you do since you don't want to give all your money away on an individual charitable basis? And he's like, you tax labor less and you tax wealth more. Or wealth, you call it capital. But that's very simple. Labor should be, I would see tax cuts for labor and rinse people who make money with money. Simple.
Yep. Joe Banks, I just saw that Minnesota Senator Tina Smith is not seeking re-election. Would it make sense to pressure her to go all in for the rest of her term? She's been pretty good. But yes, I think Peggy Flanagan is like a likely person to maybe to run in that race. It seems like that's the case. The lieutenant governor under Walz right now. And the final IM of the day. Sad Tired says, the suffering of the Bibas family is heartbreaking, as is the immense loss of Palestinian lives. It comes off as gross and heartless when prominent leftists like Hassan... Oh, okay. Well, this is not the final IM of the day.
No, I want to hear this one, though, because I want to talk about this.
I thought this was positive. Hassan laugh and dismiss the suffering and mourning of Israeli civilians in the name of pro-Palestine activism. I don't know when he did that.
I don't believe he did. I reject the notion that he did, but I would also say it is heinous the way atrocity propaganda is being used by Israel, whether it's this instance or the others, and it should be met with fucking scorn. And people that don't understand how weird it looks in the context of tens and tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dead bodies, to be focusing on the hair color of a few others victims is insane. Are you people insane? You're not helping.
I mean, it's white supremacy, and it's
Exactly.
And the fact that they're even focusing on the hair color.
Wake the fuck up. Hassan does great work every goddamn day.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the idea. I'm surprised that anyone in our audience feels this way, but like, can you imagine if it was if they were talking about blonde hair in the way that they talk about the hair color of these kids? Like,
They absolutely would.
they would. And what does that sound like?
Fascism. That's what
Yeah.
Zionists are.
Yes. Nicola says Hassan did not do that.
Also,
It's
there's
an
plenty.
evening-
There's plenty of it's well known. It's well known that like red hair is also seen quite frequently in the Middle East through with other backgrounds and ethnicities. Why does it's just a stupid thing to bring in with? I'm sure there's some redheaded kids in Palestine and Gaza that were killed. Why doesn't anyone care about them?
It's a Nazi thing to get in with. It is white supremacist. It needs to be said that it's hysteria. It's effing hysteria the way that this stuff is presented.
Also, the family of the family of these kids are talking about how disrespectful the conversation around their deceased loved ones are right now too. Why is no one respecting the family of these kids?
The same reason they didn't give a fuck about the hostages, because they want to use them to do a genocide.
Yeah. Dave from Jamaica, dumbest I am. I've heard from in a while. Let's see if we can find another I am to end on.
Don't criticize Hassan to us, please.
Yeah, I
Shut
don't
the
like
fuck
it.
up.
I don't like it. Especially on this issue. Especially because you know how aligned we are with him on this topic. Well, there's a few more I ams asking about. You guys are just like trying to stir shit now. That Anna monologue about us, which is pretty funny. I was expecting like just put a lot. There's a teleprompter, lots of research that went into it, and yet no argument was made. It seems like no. People probably don't even know what I'm talking about.
Josh, you're unhinged, and guess what? I'm elated that you watch Majority Report. They deserve you.
It popped up on my like suggested videos list. It didn't have a lot of views, so I didn't watch it because I didn't think it was very good. But like I saw it. I scrolled past.
Honestly, I skipped around a bit, but when I say it was one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen in my life, it had like all of the trappings of a real, I prepared for this. And you keep wondering like, what do they have? What does she have? What's she going to say next? And even the clips that she would play, like, didn't match her commentary next. It was like somebody that had never made an argument before was asked to make an argument in law school or something like that. And it was completely incomprehensible. But I guess
Instead, she plays the role of hall monitor. She polices what one can say, what they should believe, who they can talk to, and what they can talk about.
The famous actor we once knew is looking paranoid and now spiraling.
You know, I like hall monitors. I used to watch that like cartoon show Fillmore all the time. So, you know,
I've been known to be a hall monitor, policing what people say and do. I honestly thought that was Tulsi Gabbard for 1 second. What'd you say?
Don't hall monitors only like police like the halls, like where people like if people can go to class or can't go to class, like they don't really police what you say or do.
Yeah, right. That's a good point. That would be more like cops.
They take a bathroom pass.
or prison guards. All right, guys. The final I am of the day now, and not someone that's trying to goad me into saying something funny. All right, here we go. Rob from Dedham. The thing that infuriates me the most about this whole release the documents thing, whether Epstein or JFK or anything, is that not only is it a limited hangout, but it's completely obscures that the CIA and intelligence in general was developed to serve the most right-wing factions of society. It is by nature ultra-capitalist and anti-left, and all these right-wingers acting like the CIA is some liberal left-wing entity is one of the most insane things to believe. Exactly right. But it fits into their victim complex, so that's all that matters. Anyway, appreciate the IMs folks. I think lots of people IMing in right now. We'll if you want to say some of this stuff, IM us tomorrow. We're gonna head out. Appreciate you all. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot lights shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,